in the household. You know, when I was in college in the late 90s, I was actually involved in building some websites for restaurants in San Francisco. So
in HTML?
Yep.
We have that in common. We have that in common. 96, 98, stuff like that.
It was about that time, in the 98 kind of time frame. And then, yeah, so I was doing that. But then I had worked a lot in media growing up in the Bay Area, radio, television, newspaper, and the opportunity to kind of do something with an internet company was intriguing to me because it was still fairly early days. No one could kind of claim 10 years of work experience in any company, kind of felt at that time. And other thing that was interesting to me was to have some study abroad kind of experience. And so I went to Syracuse University. They had a study abroad program for the summer in Madrid, London, and Singapore. The Singapore one, you actually got attached to a company for the summer, and you got, you know, course credit, but then work experience. And, you know, I inquired if you know, I could actually have a hand in choosing the company I could actually work at versus getting assigned one. That wasn't normal for them, but they said, well, if you want to do it, you got a couple weeks, good luck trying to find yourself a job in Singapore. And I was in New York at the time. But Yahoo was the biggest internet company, so I started at the top and found the phone number, called the office in Singapore, made my pitch, and they agreed. So I was the first intern that they actually had in that office. So that was the summer of 2000. And so yeah, you talked about the .com kind of bubble bursting. So the bubble burst in the States that spring. It didn't really catch up, as I remember, like in Asia until like spring of 2001. So when I was there in the summer.
Same in Europe, and it was the same with subprimes, you might remember. It started in the US, and we hoped it wouldn't get to us, and then eventually it did.
Yeah, so so that summer I worked on the launch of Yahoo Shopping. We had a very kind of glitzy product launch event in Singapore for that. I just remember like the kind of environment seemed to be, it was just go, go, go. And so if there's any notion of like a bubble bursting, definitely did not feel it in that office, in that market at the time. And then, you know, they also asked me to, towards the end of that summer internship, to work on, they called it emerging markets, but it was places like Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines. And so they were getting all this inbound interest from people who actually wanted to advertise on Yahoo. So the sales team just said, hey, can you take these? Because we don't have enough time and bandwidth to kind of get to them, because they were focused really on advertisers really in Singapore and maybe Malaysia. And so there was this company in Thailand that I was dealing with, and they said, oh, well, you know, apologies, you know, our English is not very good. And I was like, well, my Thai is non-existent. And so we went back and forth and negotiated an advertising deal over Yahoo Messenger text chat. And then it was at the end of that internship, they actually emailed over a signed insertion order for an advertising deal that I actually brokered. And I still have because I was working on my yahoo.com email, so I still have a copy of that. And I've looked at that a couple times in the past. It is a ridiculous CPM. And it was like, this is the rate card. They didn't even ask to actually get any kind of discounts or anything. And it was just this time and environment where I think marketers actually felt compelled that like they had to be seen to be doing something with online advertising. And so I don't want to say that I did any great like sales job. It was really just, you know, responding and kind of going through. But I think
right place at the right time.
Yeah. So I think that actually kind of caught the GM's attention. And then that turned into a conversation about, you know, where my interests are and if it would be to work actually in Singapore full time. And so ended up making that happen, and came back January of 2001. So accelerated my senior year of school, and it was there for the fall semester, and then came back to Singapore right after the start of the year, in a full-time role. And I thought I would go there for a year, come back and went out there. It was like with two bags, and came back 15 years later with a wife and 3 kids.
That's a story that resonates with me too. How many times was I supposed to stay 2 weeks and stayed 2 years or more? Um, how was it at the beginning to jump into such a different culture, though?
So Singapore, I mean, it's more and more cosmopolitan and multinational today. But yeah, at that time, I feel like in the internet industry in Singapore back then, it was kind of like you could actually fit probably everyone that worked at a .com in like a single bar. It was like you kind of knew who was in that space, and MSN really didn't have an office out there. Google was like years away from having any kind of presence. And so it was Yahoo kind of like providing some of that early foundation. And the other part is like, because it was the big company, people in some ways kind of equated Yahoo to the internet. And so there's this assumption made that like, if you worked at Yahoo, you must know everything about the internet. And now while working there, sometimes you can kind of drink the Kool-Aid or you're in that bubble and you get deluded yourself and think like, yeah, understand everything. But you got this interesting kind of, macro view. And I love kind of going through the back end of the data and kind of just, looking at all the traffic and activity on like yahoo.com and then across all the other, because Yahoo had all these different country portals. And so there was like the .com.sg was the one in Singapore. And so just seeing like, what are people searching, browsing, and kind of consuming at that time. And then I think on the outside, it was, there are a lot of people who actually wanted to kind of get up to speed actually on that. So that was like one thing. And I think the other part from a business side, the role that I actually had was introduce and build out Yahoo Broadcast. So it came out of the broadcast.com acquisition. So building out video streaming, both live and on demand in the region at that time.
What year was that?
In 2001.
So 4 years before YouTube?
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is still in the days of like, if you wanted to watch video online, you had to have Windows Media Player, Real Media Player.
Right.
Apple QuickTime was pretty low penetration because the
Apple wasn't what it is today.
Correct. This is years before they had the iPhone or even the iPod. Yeah. So it was like,
for anybody who's listening, let's remember Google was not even existing at the time.
No, it was. It was 3 years old at this time.
Really?
But yeah. So Google is started in 98.
I always thought it started in 2001. My mistake.
No, but just a quick one on that. Just jumping in, and I'll come back. But like in 2004, when they were going public, I remember being in a management meeting at Yahoo, and there's a discussion, or actually around the table, on like who is buying into the IPO at $85 a share, and the way that comment was actually made was like, who's silly enough to actually buy in at this like $85 price, and like can this actually hold up? Prior to that, I think there just wasn't great kind of knowledge of actually how well they actually were monetizing with AdWords. Yahoo back then, again, was the biggest kind of search engine, I think, for queries and traffic. But I also remember around that time, the sales team used to just give away keywords. It was the bonus to buying web banners on Yahoo. They didn't even really value it. And then here comes Google with this like core AdWords product and just took over the market. But coming back to like, on the streaming and Yahoo Broadcast, now this was also, so it was like introducing a product that no one was actually seeking. I mean, people are still just trying to like get online and be able to like, the broadband was like 128K. So there's still a lot of people on 56K dial up. And it was actually to have like a good web browsing experience and like, wait, now you want me to go watch video? Like, is this even going to be, good? And so we weren't really focused on the consumer market. We were actually looking at the corporate market. And so the idea here was, okay, well, companies actually have conferences and events. And I was actually doing work with Nokia, and they had a really big regional office in Singapore, and they had their Symbian developer community. And so they had like 3,000 people, I think, in that community at the time in the region. They would have these developer conferences, have 300 people kind of attend. And so 2,700 people were not actually getting access to whatever's getting discussed there. So I remember talking with a person who was actually kind of overseeing this from a marketing standpoint and talking about like, well, we could webcast this. We could actually webcast it live. And then actually we could put it up as an archive and for the other 2,700 people. And it's like, all right, well, that sounds interesting or good. So what is this going to cost? And it's like, well, how much are you spending for this conference for the 300 people? Why not that same price that reached the other 2,700? And it was like, okay, so it was at that time, like the Yahoo broadcast team was all headquartered out of Dallas because it came out of the broadcast. That's where Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner started broadcast.com. And they were all just focused on the US. And I remember actually being on calls with folks there and asking for advice on pricing and everything else. And they used to be like, where are you calling from? I said, Singapore. Where is that? And
which state? In which state is that city?
Yeah. And then it was just like, I don't know. It's actually a little bit more vulgar language than just simply, I don't know. But it was like, aren't you in this role to go figure this stuff out? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So then you don't really care how I'm actually pricing this whole thing. So I'm getting access to, I think what it was at the time, the most advanced, video streaming kind of technology. And again, Yahoo being the biggest web destination. And this is what Google ended up doing later, but Yahoo was kind of early days in building out data centers all around the world. And then we were in Singapore actually hooked in with Singtel, the Singapore telecommunications company at the hub. And so we had like incredible pricing to stream video, which was also very expensive actually at that time. And so from there it was like, all right, how do we go and make this market? And so what I was looking at back then was how do I find willing partners here who, again, are not actually looking for this solution. And so what I focused on a lot was talking to people about stakeholder communication. And it's like, who are your stakeholders? How are you communicating with them? And I was trying to like listen and see like where are their pain points, and then how could video streaming and delivery of messaging through video streaming address some of those problems and pain points. And so then it was like trying to find a match there of like, yeah, you weren't out seeking it because it was so new. No one had really even seen some of this stuff before. And that was the thing, is like, I need to build up a roster of people who are kind of leaning in and experiencing this. And so, worked with the Singapore stock exchange. And then it was a whole process basically of every company that's doing a quarterly earnings. How do we actually go and webcast this and actually make this accessible and available to more people than was prior? So not just Nokia, but then IBM, Cisco Systems. So all these companies with similar developer communities. How do you actually engage with the broad set of people in that community and not just those who come to physically attend your events? And that was the way we kind of went and built that foundation. The struggle I also had at the time, I think with some of the local folks in Singapore was this mentality though of like, I need to see two or three people do this first. Like, I do not want to be the first one to actually go and try it. And so I found a lot more success actually with the people that were coming in from the Nokia headquarters in Finland, who were just ready to go and try things out. And it was like, I don't actually want to wait to see two or three other people. I want to be the first in my industry or category doing this, and I'm going to learn faster and grow and adapt from that. And so I was also trying to identify those people, because it's like we are trying to build this whole industry infrastructure kind of together. I mean, or the way I was is like, we need to actually build this thing kind of together, from that side. So that was, yeah.
20 years in though, and with the long career and always being early at many things, don't you think that's the way of innovation? That you come up with something that people, it's like Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they want, they would have told me faster horses. Then wouldn't have told me the car. But then the problem is you are too early, as investors would call it. You have to become an evangelist. You have to become a pioneer. And then it becomes that job of empathy that you need to, like you said, understand their pain points to explain to them how that thing they don't want, don't understand, and don't think they need. You find your way to the door. And it's also what you just said resonates with me, that nobody wants to be the first because supposedly the first one gets shot. But then again, there are opposing economic studies that show that the innovators take the most market share. And so you find that one who is just opposite to all the others. I want to be first. And it's kind of a job like in a video game where you have to meet 100 people until you find the one that tells you the opposite of everybody else.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Hopefully, it's a quick story, but like, so I was doing that work with Nokia, and then they actually invited me into their product council in Singapore, and so they were allowing me to actually get early access and visibility on phones that were like 18 months out to launch, and they asked me to come in from my Yahoo position. It was like Yahoo equals the internet. And so they were thinking at that time about software and internet-based services that then could be going into their phones, so they could actually go and sell more of them. And so it was the 6820, which was the first phone to actually have XHTML. And so I remember seeing this, and it's like, oh wow, this is fascinating. This is like not browsing through WAP, like this is like kind of true web, and on that device. And so I had seen that.
Old that some of the people who listen to us will not remember what WAP is.
But, okay, so there's that point. Then there's kind of also around this time I was doing a lot of work with HSBC, and at a global level, they signed a rather large consulting agreement with Yahoo. Actually, today I would still consider it rather large. Back then it was kind of then massive. And the whole thing was signed at, like, I think the number 2 in the bank signed this deal, and it was basically, hey, come and teach us how to be more internet savvy. So I had then this opportunity across Asia Pacific to then bounce around to different countries and get time with the country CEO for like Philippines or Malaysia or Taiwan, and then their executive team. And again, it was like, talk me through your key stakeholders and your stakeholder communication. And just a quick aside as well, like
and show me your data a little bit under NDA so that I can study the world.
Sure. So is that too. But then there is this gentleman who is kind of a program manager for this spend on a global level. I remember being in London once at their headquarters and for some offsite, and then we're in their like executive bar and having a pint, and then he had, like, a lot of people, well, back then I think, or it was this view, I think people thought I was much older than what I actually was, and I got
you look much younger than you actually are.
Cool. But yeah, so back then it was like, and this is like folks in Asia, and I again being young, I was and some of the roles and positions I kind of had, I was very conscious of that, because I kind of felt like, well, if you know my actual age, you're going to discount me. Like, how can you possibly know this or that, or why should we be listening to you because you're at this age? And so then this gentleman asked me my age, and I think I was 23 at the time. I remember him spitting out his beer, and it was like, wait, we're taking advice from a 23, and it's like, do you like what I'm saying? And it's like, no. So it's like, so is there a problem? We had that. But anyhow, so we had, so I was like bouncing around the region, meeting these folks. I remember them being in the Philippines, and I was getting guided by the head of marketing through the office and to like the meeting room. And then there was a stack of, so back then, if you had a credit card with a bank, they would send you this booklet, and each page was some offer that you can get by using the HSBC credit card. If you use it at this restaurant, you get 10% off, or you go to this nail salon, you get 15% off, or whatever else. And I also remember, like, when I grew up playing youth soccer, we used to sell those booklets to raise money for the team. But this was one you would get as holding the credit card. And so there was just a stack of these things piled up, and there was an offhand comment he made about like what a waste of money it was to actually be printing and shipping these books, because he said when people get them, they just chuck them. And I was like, oh, well, how much do you spending a year on this? And he said $7 million. I thought, wow, $7 million in just the Philippines on these things that you're acknowledging as a head of marketing is a waste of money. And I was thinking, like, maybe there's a better way to do this. So then I was like thinking, like, okay, there's Nokia, and they had this phone that I know about, and I was trying to be careful of how I was going, but it was like, I know that there's something new coming. There's going to be this new device with true web browsing. You have this thing that you're acknowledging as a total waste of marketing spend, but you have all these people who actually have credit cards. And so I then was like, is there a way that I can get you two to come together? So the idea here was, what if we can actually digitize everything in that booklet, and so that you could browse on this mobile device. And if I have an HSBC credit card and I'm going out to like Greenbelt or Glorieta in Makati, which is like a shopping entertainment district in Manila, I can then go see, hey, tonight, Friday night, what restaurants are offering what discounts or benefits, for me as an HSBC credit card member. And obviously this brings more footfall traffic into the restaurant. It's also good for HSBC. They drive more card usage and everything else. So it's like, I get the whole point of actually why you have the offers in the first place, but your method of delivery is failing you, right? And by having this printed in this booklet, but everyone's got their mobile phone, and in the Philippines,
timing is everything.
But back then, even more so now. So I was like, what if we digitize this? And so on the front end to the consumer, they're going to be able to actually browse this stuff on their mobile phone. And on the back end, we'll build a web portal where every single one of your merchants can actually manage their offers and rewards, and they can update this stuff in real time. And so if they have like low traffic coming into their restaurant, they can actually go pop up. And I was thinking about, like, okay, is there some way to actually do alerts and stuff? So they're like, hey, that's interesting. Then I went back to Nokia and I said, hey, I got HSBC has their like red credit card. You guys launch like 20 something phones a year. This one device, would you guys be willing not to launch? And the way that they would launch phones was always through the telco. So Globe or Smart, and in the Philippines. And so I said, for this one phone, would you guys be willing to actually give 2 weeks early access and sales to people who actually have an HSBC credit card? And the regional team in Singapore is like, this sounds interesting to go and test. The local team in Manila was like, absolutely not. We have to adhere to our relationships with Globe and Smart. But again, it was like, you guys are doing 20 launches a year, just one. And so we kind of got the regional team to come down on the local team and actually agree to this. And then in that 2 week, kind of call it the pre-sale before Globe and Smart actually got it, the HSBC card users basically sold out that phone at whatever their sales target was. And then that guy, I remember in Manila, comes back to Singapore for some regional meeting and touting like what a brilliant thing that they were doing. And it was like, come on, you were actually a detractor at the time, but whatever. if you want to take the credit, you can go ahead and take the credit on that front. But it was anyway. So then we put this whole thing together, and then I was chatting with this is some years later with my kind of partner at HSBC in the Philippines. And it was like, yeah, we were years ahead of actually having like GPS capability on phones, on mobile alerts and stuff. But it was like,
real-time bidding, because they could change their
well,
alerts to
yeah.
compete.
So I was thinking later, it's like there's like 5 companies, like billion-dollar business, like I could think of now, that are doing versions of what we were doing back in this like 2003 or something. Um, yeah, so it was a little bit ahead of its time. But
You know what we
I
I
but
have the same feeling about a few things we did at Kickstarting. We did blogging before the word blog existed. We were doing content marketing 10 years before the words content marketing. And I sometimes joke to my partner at the time, we should have come up with buzzwords, you know? It's the only thing we forgot to do. It's to give these things buzzwords, and we would be famous by now.
actually, I just know the mug I'm having my tea. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, Yahoo Singapore GeoCities. I think this mug's like over like 20 years old. I mean, this is like a precursor to like Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, the first gen, you know, ability for people to go create their own like profile and page, you know, online. Actually, that was something I kind of saw from Yahoo was they acquired so many different businesses that then there's a parallel company in this space that is still around or very successful, and it's almost like maybe not the best thing for Yahoo to buy you. And then, you know, because they almost bought Google, Facebook, eBay, and in some ways it was, I think, good for each of those companies not to have been acquired, because it would have gone a very different way. Yeah, anyway, so but I think coming back to it, it's like, yeah, I was very lucky to have that opportunity to kind of be out in that region, and then kind of be working actually in some of these companies that were leaders in their space and category, get access, you know, to then a whole wider set of businesses that actually wanted to come and talk to you. So then you got to go learn about, like, you know, other technology companies, financial companies. It's just like industry after industry, you know, from that side. And I mean, I joked before, I kind of went out, I thought I was going to do a year and did 15. But I think it was largely because, you know, every couple of years there's just like some new green field, and it just keeps you kind of going at it. And it's just like, all right, I'm learning, growing. I'm really enjoying this. And so for me,
you said something very important earlier. You said you were 23 years old and you were the young guy in the room. Many of us, me included, my career is accidental, really, and I owe it to the internet. And when I look at the young guys today, when they come out of school, there are new opportunities. I don't deny that. But the birth of the internet was that one moment where old guys would listen to young guys. And I also had that moment, and many of my friends at the time had that moment where they were 20 years younger than everybody else in the room, and yet they were taken seriously because it was about the internet.
Sure. And I think, like, if I think about my kind of corporate career, I mean, Yahoo, it was a fascinating group of people that were actually working there. And it was less to do with like where you went to school. I feel like, yeah, so it was less kind of on that as like as a bar or a status. And I was lucky also when I joined, I got the tail end of people who were actually some of the first like 200 employees in the company, and they were at the tail end of their vesting, and they chose to actually go move out to Singapore, and their final kind of stock vesting was actually occurring there. And so I overlapped with that group. It also was really interesting to me of like people who jumped in, you know, back in '95, and yeah, I mean, in some ways I would say chose well in terms of the company that they were, you know, kind of working for, because there was a lot of other .coms in that early era that did not amount to where Yahoo
go through the burst that we talked about.
I think then when I joined eBay in '04, that was a interesting transition where And I came in and I was like, wait, this. Okay, so at Yahoo is like what I was kind of seeing is if the sales team did not go out and make an effort to go close deals, the revenue wasn't coming in. It was a predominantly ad driven business, and you needed the feet on the street kind of going out and driving those deals. And then come over to eBay, and it was like, wait, we just went to sleep and we made a lot of money while we were sleeping, right? Because you got the sellers who were just listing goods, paying the listing fees. If they sell, then they're paying a transaction fee on that. And so I was seeing.
I had a taste of this at kickstarting around 2002, and that was also mind changer for me.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
we have this cash flow machine. And I'm not sure if it did that for you too, that your self-confidence goes up a little bit because you can fail a few more things and make more risky bets.
Well,
because you have that cash flow machine.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. So one, it was like seeing the network effect in action. But then I had a manager, I also remember back then, who early on said, "Hey, don't delude yourself. You at best have plus minus 5% impact on what's going on the platform, right? Because it's like with the platform and the network effect, it takes over. And so it was like, don't kid yourself and try to tell me or convince me that these things that you're doing are having this like material impact. Like it is happening regardless of actually what you're doing. You're only going to swing plus minus 5%. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But then, yeah, there were some things where it's like, okay, how do we go and kind of plant seeds or go build certain kind of markets and categories and things like that to then get it to this point. And then there was this notion that like where you I just remember that this 30% kind of bar on where you get to like active internet users, then kind of or having your penetration get to that 30% mark is then when it really takes on. It just goes into a whole nother level. And so in each of these markets that I was actually I worked on the launch of Malaysia market, Philippines market, that I was overseeing Singapore and Hong Kong. So eBay, similarly to Yahoo, had these like country domains. So it wasn't like Yahoo or like YouTube where it all just comes back to like just one domain that you access globally. And so on that front, it was like seeding each of these things, and what we were focused on was like
the very beginning of globalization as well. It was not just the beginning of the internet; it was the beginning of globalization. There were still a lot of borders, offices, and of course, you and I already were chatting using chat messages. But the bosses at the time were all the people who we couldn't convince of remote work, and we still had that old mentality with new technology, I would say.
Yeah,
a little bit. It was evolving, but slower than I would have wished for.
I mean, I think until the pandemic, I mean, I was so because I was so trained on this notion that like you work and you work in an office. There is no work at home. No, you can do
even you, my friend.
It's like you can do meetings and stuff kind of in the evening, but it's like the idea like all throughout the day, you're actually going to be working at home. And it was like, no, you're job hunting if that's what you're telling me you're doing. That was the mentality that I was kind of I grew up and got trained in. It's like you're in the office. You're in the office kind of before your boss, and you wait till your boss leaves, and then you leave. That was the system in like. Especially in Hong Kong, but to some degree in Singapore as well. Yeah, then over the last year, it was like, wow, well, you can actually stay you can stay productive and in some ways be more productive. So I've seen that more firsthand, and it's I don't know if I remember.
In cities where you commute a lot. I mean, I stayed 10 months in LA, and coming from Hong Kong, which is crowded but pretty good at commuting because of the MTR and all that. LA was a nightmare for me. You needed to lose 2 hours to get to one meeting. And I was like, so you can basically program 2 meetings a day in this city. And for cities like that, I feel like remote work is a blessing and a revolution. And there are many of those cities around the world. The megalopolis, where you hear people telling me, oh no, I'm very close from the office. It's just 1 hour in the morning. I'm like, 1 hour in Belgium? I drive 1 hour in any direction. I'm in another country.
Yeah, you could do an hour and a half in Jakarta, and yeah, you were moving a couple blocks. The traffic is horrendous there. You know, parts of Manila, Bangkok. It's a lot more productive in like Hong Kong and Singapore, Tokyo, Seoul. Actually, Seoul's got some traffic. Anyway, but
After eBay, you got into Turner Broadcasting. Was that an effect of they saw you as the guy who knows everything about the internet because Yahoo and eBay and we Turner have to learn it, and you thinking, oh cool, I can learn more of the broadcasting world, what we call to be linear media, what we called back then broadcasting and television. And how did that happen?
So it was. I'll just say like my Yahoo to eBay. I was actually interested. I mean, at Yahoo again, it was like you're effectively consulting other people and trying to help them get better, smarter at internet marketing. And then I was kind of like, I'm actually interested to like eat my own dog food on this stuff and like just do it direct. And so that opportunity to go to eBay and lead marketing, and then actually, they didn't even tell me before I joined that also part of my job was also launch new eBay markets. Like they wanted me to be there on day one before they told me that's what I was actually going to be up to. Because I was Yahoo back then was actually leading e-commerce across Asia. It was the one region where eBay was not the leader. So they thought like maybe there's a chance I'm actually not going to show up, and so they didn't want to really give away the full story. And then when I came in, they're like, oh, okay, I got 6 weeks to go launch eBay in Malaysia. So what's the playbook? And they're like, well, the playbook is normally we acquire whoever the local competitor is, and then we just turn that into eBay. But there's no one big enough in Malaysia that warrants an acquisition, so you just got to go launch it organically. And so you got to go figure it out. And I was like, oh, I've had that role before. And then for Turner, it is actually a Yahoo. Ex-Yahoo colleague who I was in some ways actually kind of competing with in Hong Kong. He actually led commerce for Yahoo in Hong Kong, and I was at eBay. And so again, we knew each other. We were ex-colleagues before, but we were effectively, competing for leadership role in that market. He left. He actually went to Turner, and then he asked me one day. He says, "Hey, can you chat with the head of entertainment?" They're thinking about actually how to kind of transform the kind of digital business from what it was back then. It was a function of marketing, and it was really just promoting the TV networks and like what shows are on at what time. And they were kind of thinking like, no, we actually want to transition this into an actual digital business unit that operates its own P&L, makes investment decisions, and is just growing as a business, and not like always in support of the core television business. So we end up having a series of lunches and chats, and he was asking like, so what would you do? And I just took it as like, oh, this is fun. Like, just getting also, I was enamored actually with Time Warner's, brands and stuff at the time. And so it was interesting to me outside of what I was kind of doing at eBay. And then it just got to a point where he's like, so why don't you come and just do what you're saying? I was like,
yeah. I was about to say, watch out. When you become a big shot, that's how job interviews go. What would you do over coffee?
Anyway, so then the intriguing thing for me was, I went from being based in Singapore, doing a lot of work in Southeast Asia, some work in India and Australia, but a lot of it Southeast Asia. And then the Hong Kong thing, I think for me was with eBay. It was that market was a rocket ship at that time, and big. One little small market, but it accounted for a significant percent of eBay's international profit. To where we actually had a lot of FaceTime with.
My days in Hong Kong were also eye-opening in that respect. They used to have the song about New York. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Hong Kong is a little bit of of that going for it as well.
Yeah,
It's
but
fast, it's competitive,
oh yeah,
it's
no.
very cosmopolite.
Well, at the
It's
time
close
as
to
well.
China, it's close to Japan. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Well,
like you
so
said, it's a rocket ship.
yeah. So a few things. It's like I think in Singapore, what I remember back then was there's a lot of comparisons to Indonesia and Malaysia, and I remember thinking like, I don't know if that's or yeah, it was like at that the Indonesia's really kind of taken off now, but like back then, definitely it was very very different market, and so I remember thinking you can always look good if that's like what your competition is. Whereas in Hong Kong, I think it was looking, it was Japan, Korea, China. And so it was just bigger kind of markets. And I think the mentality I remember there was people were just very interested to try a lot of things out, not really kind of scrutinize. That's not to say that they weren't scrutinizing, but it's like in Singapore, is just this hesitancy to move on something new. Hong Kong was like, I am all over it. And so,
Paralysis analysis. Yeah, I love that about Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, it's just do it.
yeah. So
I want to paraphrase Nike, but it's really do it today, if not, maybe tomorrow. And sometimes it takes 3 days, but it's really a rush and a race. And you can see a thing at a price in the morning and another price in the afternoon in some Sui Po, as if it was the damn stock exchange, right? Live in the streets, retail goes as fast as the stock exchange over there.
Yeah. So I think it was, I mean, that's what kind of got me there. And then I think it was, interesting and fun, but I also, I mean, the role I had at eBay, I was overseeing marketing and communications in a market that everything was in Cantonese, which I don't read, write, or speak. So my role was to go up there and actually hire and train the team. And the head of HR at the time, when he actually learned that I actually got the job, and it was an internal move, he was like, "You better have an exit plan." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You don't read, write, or speak the language." So I get why you got this, because you can then you can hire and onboard people and train them up. But once they become pretty competent actually in their role, like your market value is going to tank. So I give you 2 years, and you better have an exit plan. And so I wasn't thinking like, oh, 2 years and I leave the company. But then that Turner opportunity presented itself kind of around that time, and that was a regional job. And so for me, it was like, oh, this is great. Now I actually I have scope now to get more exposure and access into Japan, into Korea, more stuff in mainland China. Whereas eBay was like losing that battle to Alibaba, and it's like I don't even want to be anywhere near that thing. It's just like
you also worked on pretty cool properties, I think, like Ben 10 and other anime stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's when I got there. But I'm saying like, so just answering the whole thing of like that move, I think it was that kind of rationalization. And so yeah, the regional thing I think was quite intriguing to me. And then yeah, it was entertainment business, so nothing really to do with news and CNN. And then on the entertainment side in Asia, the real big business was Cartoon Network. It was the biggest kids network across the region, 90 million plus kind of viewers, households. It was huge and really, really big in India. Turner actually ran two, or still does, has two kids networks, Cartoon Network and Pogo. And so it was just a dominant kind of market share of that market. And then, so that was interesting for me also in just getting access to a younger generation and how they were also coming online, and then be able to see this, because then it's like, well, that's going to give you some indication of like where also things are kind of going. So that was that part. I think the other piece was then getting access and exposure into gaming, because at that time, TV business was the core. So the view was, it's like, no, we don't want you taking our episodes and assets and then building out a online video business. The view was you are going to cannibalize our TV ratings. And it's like, well, what about the shows that you're not putting on the programming grid anymore? And it's like, nope, can't touch that. And it's like, but you're not even selling DVDs of these things. But it's like, no, can't touch that. So it's like it was hard to get access to the video library, but then there was no kind of blockage, I would say, on taking the IP from all of these series, and then actually making games. And then it was also
Through
there.
licensing, right?
Huh?
Through licensing with other developers and publishers, or in-house.
No, we were doing this in house, and so
Okay.
yeah.
I didn't
So
know that.
when I got there, so we ended up actually kind of building out resources and teams and kind of studios in Hong Kong, Seoul, Mumbai. We had a big operations center actually out of Manila. And yeah, so some things were with partnerships. There's a number of things that we were doing in house, and then the other part though was there was no blockage on actually using the IP and actually telling new stories through gameplay. So I found that fascinating. It was like, wait, so we don't need to actually get anybody's approval for this? Like we can actually approve this? And it was like, well, this is actually on one hand
So you
awesome.
mean I cannot do anything on video, but in gaming I can do whatever I want?
Yeah. And so I was like, well, this
Gaming
is
at the time was an afterthought. It was
totally.
like a toy, like some licensing stuff nobody wants.
No, it was. And so then we were looking at this and it's like, if you're a young kid, you're going online, it's really two things are going to drive that: to watch video or to play games. So if I can't give you the first, then I'm going to get you on the second. And so that was that piece. And then I think the other part was that became the crux of the online kind of presence and community. And I kind of recall, like, we built up an online community of registered users to the tune of like 30 million people across Asia. So we ended up actually having this direct line to a lot of kids.
What year was that?
2008 to 2012.
So Facebook was barely out.
Facebook had gone, yeah, at the early stage, they'd just gone outside of schools. And yeah, we actually did stuff across, like we did game distribution on Facebook, and we're playing around with that. Not the best for like Cartoon Network IP, right? Because like it's kids content, that wasn't Facebook's audience at all. But we were doing it more from,
it still isn't.
well, we were doing it more from a kind of like experimentation standpoint. It was like, let's just get into a lot of different things and learn firsthand and then optimize. But yeah, that was
Were you doing mobile games at the early stage of mobile games as well?
Yeah, we were the mobile apps and games. That was more towards the maybe 2010, because I don't remember being super deep into, like, in 2008. So out of the U.S. office, there was a huge investment into a massive multiplayer online game called Fusionfall. That was the first one built using Unity. It's actually Unity's first major kind of game release that Turner kind of led, and that was actually developed out of a studio in Seoul. So it was led by the U.S. team, but it was happening in Asia. So we were kind of across that, and I was getting exposure to that. And then we also started doing work in China. And so, the company actually, its television distribution was limited to hotel rooms, and there was no major kind of distribution. So, like Disney has, now theme parks and consumer products, and so there's ways to get the IP awareness up. And with Cartoon Network and some of the Warner Brothers IP, it's like you don't have this television arm. Like, how are people to actually know about your IP and actually become kind of fans of that? And so what we started looking at from our end on the digital side was like, well, no one's actually blocking us actually from having a web presence. They can definitely block you on television distribution, but it wasn't so much the case on that. Then furthermore, I was like, what if we actually went and partnered with Chinese businesses? And my thought here was, let's go partner with the gaming companies, not the video platforms. And what I was interested in is, like, the gaming companies have this direct to consumer relationship and payment. And I'm more interested to actually build that business out than trying to build some video distribution that we have to get to some numbers, then turn on advertising, have that make sense, and play that game. And so I worked with a company in Fuzhou called NetDragon, and I was dealing with the chairman was like super interested in collaborating in the IP, and we learned a ton on how we were putting characters and IP actually through some of their games. They were building some stuff, but yeah, we were getting access and learning a lot actually in the mainland China market at that time, but all through gameplay. So
then after that, you went into YouTube, which is when we met each other. Well, not immediately. How did that come about? Was that again a coffee when they asked you how would you do it?
The first outreach actually came from a Google recruiter on LinkedIn, and they reached out. I remember I then responded, and then they seemed excited to kind of talk, and they said, "We've been trying to get a hold of you for a year." I thought, wait, what? I'm not that hard to get a hold of. And it's like, I went back through my messages and it's like, did I miss some inbound kind of email? And it's like, I actually couldn't find it, but it's like, well, I'm here and we're talking. So we got to kind of chatting, and I think at the time they were, looking at some new regional roles for the Asia Pacific region for the YouTube business. And there really wasn't much of a marketing team at all for YouTube in Asia at that time. Everything was really run out of San Bruno, out of the headquarters. So it just ended up being a conversation over some months, and then I met with, I feel it was like a dozen people through the interview process, all through video calls, because they were all scattered actually around the world. I remember also thinking for me, I was like, oh, this is interesting. First time actually, looking at potentially joining a company, and I've actually not met anyone face to face. And they all haven't actually met me. And but I also say over the last year with COVID and actually trying to get companies off the ground and meeting people through video entirely, it was like, nah, I've actually been there before, and it seemed to kind of work out well. So I don't think that this is actually it's not some obstacle that you can actually kind of overcome. So anyhow, it was just that kind of conversation, maybe similar to eBay and Turner, where it was like, we kind of know the direction we want to go, don't know exactly how we're going to actually get there. One of the executives kind of said to me, we know 20% of what this role is supposed to be. We're hoping you're going to fill in the other 80%. And it's those types of opportunities that frankly hook me, where it's not so well defined, and you guys should get to come in and kind of put your stamp on it. So at the time, it was a push to kind of market YouTube and focus really on the supply side. So get content creators being active uploaders to the platform. And I think there's a parallel to what I was doing earlier at eBay, where in Asia and some of the markets I worked in, we focus a lot more on the supply side than demand. So our job was to get sellers and grow them into power sellers. And then my colleagues in Australia, US, UK, would actually bring buyers to the platform. And then we would just meet together, and is a highly, efficient way to kind of do things in the markets. So on this front, it was, before it was get an individual to become a power seller. And by that point, they're in effect actually running a small business. They employ other people. So it kind of intrigued me on what the creator opportunity is and how well people actually understood that, on YouTube and in the region at the time. And I think there was a lot of things I was thinking about from eBay and just that platform and how things were kind of working and how we built that out. And then how to apply some of that thinking actually over to the YouTube platform. And then I think the other part was from the work at Turner on IP and franchise building, from digital-based IP, had kind of seen that firsthand and how successful that can actually be. And so when I was looking at the YouTube platform and the creators there, I just saw a lot of potential, from that aspect. So that was kind of the beginning, and came in and interfaced a lot with my counterparts in the marketing industry across Asia. And just like I think in the US, there's this attitude of YouTube was largely user-generated content, and so I think for marketers and some of the marketing spend, there was a reticence to put those dollars actually across YouTube, because it was like, well, what kind of content am I going to peer against? and do I really want to be advertising on a UGC platform? And I just found it's like that's not really the case here. And there's some really talented, creators and storytellers, and the content they're actually making on YouTube, I'd argue is on par with some of the factual live entertainment or live action content that you find on some of the cable networks in the region, like a Discovery or an A&E and their channels.
At the time, I think it would have been those who do your Freddie Wong, or I'm not sure if Markiplier was around already.
Yep.
Freddie Wong was the first who really impressed me in terms of quality standards. 10 years ago, we're speaking about.
Yeah, so in those early, so in the first several months, we had, so there's a couple things were kind of going on. So one, there were some US-based creators who were actually coming out to, so I was based in Singapore, so I relocated from Hong Kong to Singapore actually for the role. And so there were some big YouTube US-based creators who were actually coming out to the Southeast Asia region for fan meet and greets or these tours. And I was observing a few of them, and they were pretty amateur in terms of how they were organized and kind of run. And I think for some of the creators, it was like, well, I have a decent audience base actually in the region, so it'd be great to actually go and meet some of them face to face. And then they were getting offered maybe it was like $10,000 fees, and then plus their kind of flight and hotel to come out actually for these meet and greets. And then the person organizing that would charge some money. They would actually make a profit on that, and that was kind of that. So one, I was kind of looking at how the communities and the fan bases were kind of building up in international markets. And then also pretty soon after I joined, a friend of mine who worked for the Singapore Tourism Board, had asked me to meet with some producers that they were working with on this brand new event called the Social Star Awards. And it was the first time this thing was ever going to be held in Singapore. And it was like a big award show for social media stars. And then I looked at the lineup that they actually had and the entertainers, and they're people from traditional media, which I kind of found it amusing. It's like this whole thing is the Social Star Awards, but like where is the digital component to this?
It was like giving an award to Seinfeld for his greatest tweet.
Well, I think at the time what they were doing is they were using what they saw as like marquee names, and that was the way that they were going to get this whole thing produced. That was going to drive the brand sponsorship and everything else. So it was kind of missing the fact that actually the folks who were like this new movement, is really kind of creators coming off of the YouTube platform. So they had asked, they had shown some interest in actually having YouTube be a broadcaster or distributor, and then threw me this like very large multi-million-dollar license fee. So it was like, YouTube is just like NBC and you're going to broadcast like the Olympics. And they were kind of coming to me that way saying, hey, from a marketing standpoint, go off and pay these fees. And I thought, how about we pay you zero? And then we actually get involved and help, market this thing. And then also work with some of the creators on the platform and actually get them into the program. So as you have this thing called the Social Star Awards, it doesn't lack actually any digital talent. And so we actually kind of met on that. And then I think around the same time, I was, again, interfacing with my counterparts in the marketing industry. And they were like, oh, we finally know someone actually at YouTube. So, what's going on over there? How should we be thinking about the platform? And then again, when I listened to them and it was this UGC nature, it's like, well, I think that part I actually want to kind of go off and correct. And so with that piece, what I was thinking about is like, what about actually having some type of program that can help change perception, in this marketing industry, and get these folks actually looking at what the creators are actually on YouTube and the stuff that they're doing is of higher quality than what they had thought kind of otherwise. And so I was aware that in the US, there's the YouTube, the creator convention VidCon, that was started by Hank and John Green, who came out of YouTube, and today includes TikTok and a lot of other streaming platforms. And then was also aware of Comic-Con.
And has grown a lot.
Oh yeah,
it's a spectacle in and of itself.
it's grown tremendously. And then the other thing I was aware of was Comic-Con. And the thing I was thinking about there was how, and knew this actually from my Turner and Cartoon Network days, and how like when you have actually new IP, a film, let's say, and you can go and tease it actually at Comic-Con, and you get the fanboys and that fandom kind of rallying behind that, and you could then ride that for months to even a year out. And so what I was also thinking about was like you have some of these creators who are actually have their special projects, but none of them were actually doing any pre-marketing. And so I was like, what if I actually had an event where I can actually bring a collection of these creators together? They can actually showcase some of their new material. The people in the front of the audience are going to be their fans, and then the people in the back of the room are going to be these industry professionals. And so that the industry professionals in the back can watch the fans in front of them go crazy over the people on the stage. And because I thought, like, I could talk to you all day long, I could give you deck after deck, but when you're in that type of environment and you see it firsthand, it just hits you. And it's like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And that's actually the consumer market I'm actually targeting. And this is who they care about. So the way that things came together, so it was that so I started in August of 2012, and by the end of that year, both of these things, Social Star Awards and this new program, were actually kind of taking shape. And then they started kind of coming together to a point where it was like, hey, we're going to do these things in May of 2013 on the same week. And it was the Fan Fest will happen first, and then the Social Star Awards will happen right after that. And so I remember someone at Google came to me months before this thing was kind of going on, and they made a comment. It's like, you're really gambling with your career here. What are you talking about? And they said, you set yourself up for some potential massive failure, that if these things actually don't go well, like you're kind of done.
But if they go well, though.
Well, I remember thinking at the time, was like, that thought had actually never crossed my mind. And I was just rolling ahead, and I didn't have a team back then. And so I was actually getting a lot of volunteers from the organization, people giving me their 20% time. And so assembled a group of people, first for kind of like FanFest, which is actually what the YouTube program ended up becoming called, and then the Social Star Awards. But then I was also looking at, like, how do I get these two to play with each other? And so, like, who are the people that we're trying to bring in for the Social Star Awards? How do I also get them for FanFest? The people I get for FanFest, actually have them come off to the Social Star Awards. And so, yeah, as it got closer, I remember thinking, like, this is kind of nuts, because they were both super demanding. And it's like, yeah, I hope this stuff really does kind of go well. And they ended up, so I think on the FanFest front, there were, it wasn't a sure thing that this was actually going to perform well. But it was at the end of the first night, I think we had some US-based execs actually come in, and I think the sentiment there was all very positive, and it was immediately like, when are we doing this next? And, it's now run in, I think, 12 countries around the world, something like that. And it's run many, many times, and I think had exposure to, hundreds of thousands of consumers. And there's been, one of the early ideas was like, how cool would it be that someone is in the crowd one year watching creators on stage and saying, like, I can be up there. And that actually happened. We had creators in later years say that I was one of you out there, in the audience. And so I think there's a few things I was kind of looking at. One, it was like, how do we put creators on a pedestal, or just on a different kind of platform and stage, and treat them with respect, and showcase them in a quality manner that then has ripple effect out into the industry. I think the other thing was, it became kind of it's like a market catalyst actually for YouTube and Google in each of the countries. It was a program that a lot of the organization would rally around. And then I think within the sales organization, it was a way for the Google sales team to see firsthand these creators that are resonating with consumers who their clients are actually trying to market to. So it's just all in that kind of worked. And then on the Social Star Awards, so one of the headliners was Aerosmith. And a few days before the event, I'm in the office and I get a call, and they said, "Hey, do you have a moment? Steven Tyler wants to talk to you." And then the person hands over the phone, and then there's Steven Tyler talking, and it's just like, "Oh my God, this really is Steven Tyler," and he's pitching me this idea he has, like, and so his whole thing was in the middle of his set, he so in between, like, I think he was going to play like 2 songs during the award show. And so in between songs, he then wanted to actually get a mobile phone, and with Google Hangouts, or at the time, I think it was like Google Plus, but it was basically have like a group call. And one of the fans on there was going to say, "Steven, you're so beautiful." He air kisses it, tosses the phone, and on to the next song. And in the theater, they had actually the technology there that would actually block your mobile signal, right? So people don't actually answer calls during shows. And then they also said that like the Wi-Fi there was not like super strong. And so everyone was just paranoid that like this was going to be a terrible experience. And then this is like during a live show. So they were trying to talk him out of this. Then he said, "You know, I don't believe it. I need to talk to someone at Google." So they put him on to me, I think maybe hoping that I was going to talk him out of it. And I thought,
but they found the wrong guy. They found the wrong guy who was fearless and didn't even think that go big or go home can sometimes mean go home.
Oh, no, totally. So I then was, I remember going into a meeting room, and then I came out and I pointed over to my colleague, James, who was the head of marketing for Google Plus. He's actually now a very senior marketer at TikTok. And I was like, James, come over. And I was like, I put it on speaker. And then Steven's still like going on. He's looking at me like, "That's Steven Tyler." I was like, yeah, he's calling us. He's pitching us. And I'm looking at him, and he's like, "Oh, we could definitely make this happen." And he's thinking like, "I will buy a Wi-Fi booster and install it into that theater so that this thing actually goes down." And I think the producers are like, "Oh, you guys, like, we wanted you to like not do this." And so then it was like, "Well, can you come down to the theater? Like they're doing sound check. And he actually wants to meet you guys." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. We'll come down." And so I'm down there, and then one of the producers, so for the award show, they had asked me, they said, "Hey, can I arrange and get different YouTube creators to present each of the award categories?" And so for best music, or whatever the music category or the award was, we had this creator out of Japan, Hikakin, who was beatboxing a lot on YouTube at the time. He beatboxed the nominees. And so we had this video on a laptop, and then Steven actually is walking by one of the producers who actually has this on the laptop, and he hears it, and then he comes back and he's like, "Play that again." And so he's watching Hikakin beatbox. He's like, "Who is this guy?" And then they're explaining, and he's like, "Wait, is he here in Singapore? I want to meet him." So as I'm kind of going down to the theater, then I'm getting this call saying, "Can you get word to Hikakin, have him come down to the same sound check? Steven Tyler actually wants to meet him." So we get Hikakin down, and then he doesn't speak any English. And I actually hired a translator for him. And so we get these guys over. And then the whole setup was like, he actually wanted Hikakin to go and beatbox in front of the whole band. And so there's this moment that, unfortunately, I still have it in my memory, just watching this scene kind of unfold. And here's this like really shy YouTuber from Japan, like in front of Aerosmith, and he's beatboxing the beat to "Walk This Way." And then Steven starts bowing, and it's like, you are in. And it's basically, we are putting you in our performance. And so when we perform that track during the show, we want you kicking off, and you have your solo, and you're going to lead it through. So it's a moment like that was kind of going through, and then that moment killed. And there were some other kind of moments of creators in that show that killed. And then when I was leaving the award show, I had a lot of people kind of come over, they're like, congrats. I was like, "What are you congratulating me for?" This wasn't even my show. Like, my thing was FanFest. Like, I was like in the background kind of helping this whole thing. but I was also concerned that like this thing was just not going to go through very well. And it ended up actually going pretty well. You know, Steven in the band, you know, came to the post party. All the creators were there, and it was a heck of a night. And I'm then talking with his manager, and then it was like, okay, we need to. Aerosmith actually had a concert going on 2 nights later in Singapore. First time they were ever performing in Singapore, the whole in history. And so we were kind of like, we need to actually get him back on stage during this show. And the manager was like, no, it was a one and done. Like him being in that award show is it. And I was like, I don't know. The way we kind of saw it was like, if Steven's into it, then, you know, things will kind of roll. So we had backstage passes, and me and one of the producers were just hunting for Steven's trailer. And we're like, let's just hang out around there, and he's got to come out, and like we'll just bump into him and be like, hey, and have a chat and say like, oh, that moment, you know, the other night in the award show, like that was awesome, right? Yeah, you should do that again tonight. So that's actually what we did, and he was like, yes, we should. And I was like, oh my god, seriously? Call his translator again, and we're like, I don't know what he's doing right now. Get down here to the concert venue, and then they actually gave him like a full minute plus on stage solo just to like freestyle beatbox in front of like 12,000 people. It was a wild moment. Then I was like, I'm going to push my luck here. And so I knew that they were actually going to go tour in Japan. They were doing 4 shows in 3 cities. And so I was like, you should bring him on tour. And again, I was like, come on, don't push it. But I actually went and pulled some data, and Hikakin had way more search activity on Google and YouTube than Aerosmith. So there's a lot of these data points, and I was basically like, you put him in your show, he will help actually drive awareness, also to a younger demographic.
Another continent. This reminds me of the discussion between Angry Birds, between Rovio and Lucas about Angry Birds Star Wars. You bring us the old guys who will collect all the toys. We bring you youth and China, because Star Wars had never been released in China. And then you have these deals where it's like Peter Vesterbecker called it, peanut butter and chili. You don't think it's going to go well together, but if you try, it's delicious.
Yeah. Well, so I think like there was this bit of like, how do we get this kind of together? And so they ended up agreeing to do it. So he actually toured with the band in Japan, did all 4 shows. That then got press attention in Japan. And it was something new, because it was like, here's a guy who did not go through a traditional Japanese talent agency. He was unsigned. He was a YouTuber. And so it was like how did this happen? How did someone who doesn't actually have an agent get to perform and tour with Aerosmith? And so I think in the market ad, you know, the colleagues in that office there were, you know, picking this stuff up, and it's like that was definitely kind of making a mark. And then after that, it was a thought of like, okay, he was on, you know, Hikakin was on the up and up. And so then it was like, well, there's a lot of other creators who are actually now looking at you as like the lighthouse, and they're like, I want to follow in that path. And he ended up then actually being involved in creating a management company, which then later, you know, went and they've actually IPO'd in Japan. And I was just looking it up. Their market cap right now is $225 million. And you know, he has done quite well for himself. I think both from like stock value and also just, you know, in income and everything else. And so it was just like seeing that path from this shy, you know, Japanese creator who was beatboxing to then like what he is today. It was really fun to kind of just be involved in that in a small way. But then those 2 programs also done the same week were, I mean, it was just a ton of fun of just like trying to kind of plant the flag or kind of put something in motion that, you know, again, pays a lot of respect actually to creators. I should also say actually at the Social Star Awards, so there was the red carpet entrance. And so you had like Aerosmith, CeeLo Green, Psy, Gangnam Style was actually really big at that time. He was there. So all these guys. And so then you had
How big was it? Like 4 million views in Japan and Korea, or 1 billion views worldwide?
What's that?
How big was it in the Gangnam Style growth cycle? Was it like 4 million views in Japan and Korea?
Oh
Or
no,
was
no,
it
no. So
already the billion views worldwide?
yeah. So by this point, it was already big. Yeah.
Okay, it
So
was already the first billion views video, right? I think that's
yeah.
the first one. Okay.
So yeah. So you have all these music performers. Again, Hall of Famers like Aerosmith, and then you had Psy kind of in his moment with Gangnam Style. So you have this red carpet for this event, and then Singaporean fans, kids, teens, young adults are kind of out there, and they have the barrier. And so as these folks are kind of coming in, people are kind of like screaming and whatnot. And then the one who actually came in was interesting was PewDiePie, and he was on the up and up, right? So he was
That was a riot, right? It was
he
like
was
a rock star coming out.
he was not yet kind of mainstream. But I think those who were kind of like into like YouTube creator culture definitely knew who he was. And when he came out of his car to then go down the red carpet, they actually were tipping the barricades over. And so for the organizers, like they thought that like these creators coming in was like the side thing that they weren't even going to pay attention to. And when that moment happened, everyone like turned. It was like, what just happened? What is going on here? And that stuck with like every key producer, manager. And it's like, again,
with me, because there was an article on Mashable about it. And when I saw that, obviously I knew that PewDiePie was on an up and up on YouTube, but that he can cause a rock star level riot in Singapore from Sweden.
Yeah.
That was like, oh man, this is another level here.
Oh no, it was like
this is those moments where you realize what Brendan Gahan said. For youth, YouTube stars are the only stars. It's those moments that made me believe in that cool sentences was repeating everywhere, because I saw, oh yeah, that's the same reaction as the pop star back when I was 16. It's those kind of things, the Beatles going to America.
Well, so that was also that. The other thing I think was, so in the U.S. again, you had VidCon, and so you had these conventions where fans and creators can kind of come together. But what I would hear time and time again from these creators when they would come out to Singapore or Southeast Asia, their comment was always like, "It is at another level out here," and so there's just heavy engagement, and the fandom there is just it's intense. And so that was something that we kind of saw.
We've seen it in Hong Kong with Gundam, right?
Yeah. Actually, I was supposed to say
that anything Gundam in Hong Kong. Yeah. In Japan, you've seen it with David Beckham. You're right. If they love something, they really love it.
Yeah. Well, I think the other one was for that first fan fest. So we had like 18 creators, some of the top creators at the time on YouTube actually kind of coming out for that. And so we were flying a lot of people actually from the States, and there was no direct flight to Singapore. So then people were transiting, let's say, through Seoul. And then a bunch of creators actually, when they got to Seoul, to Incheon Airport, then they were tweeting like almost there, and then noting that they were actually in Seoul. And then all these enterprising people in Singapore were like, well, there's only so many flights from Seoul to Singapore. And so then they figured like, oh, they got to be on that one. Okay, it comes in at 1 a.m, totally fine. And the thing was, that week was finals week in Singapore. And there were a lot of kids. This was actually on Twitter, and it was basically study for finals or go to the airport and see my favorite creator or fan fest. And I thought like, oh, geez. Like we're gonna have a lot of
data. Did you look at the data? How many, if there was an under indexation of students failing that year compared to other years?
I don't know, but like but then we actually got a call from the police, and they said, hey, how you guys should have informed us that you had celebrities showing up because they have a whole different kind of setup when celebrities actually come into Singapore.
Like when Lionel Messi shows up in Paris, for example.
And we were just thinking, like, yeah, these are just a bunch of YouTube creators. But there was it's a couple, a Canadian actually couple. They live in actually no, I think now they're back in Canada. Simon and Martina. They were living in Seoul at the time, and so when they came in, they shut down the airport. It was pandemonium at like 1 a.m, and the airport police, and they had no idea what just hit them, and there were hundreds of kids out at the airport at like 1 a.m to greet Simon and Martina, and that was just one of like 18 creators coming in, and so you just had this, moment and everything else. Yeah, so I think for the Google office in Asia, that was also a little bit removed from, obviously removed geographically from what was going on in the States. Like this actually just brought it home, and everyone's actually able to kind of experience it, which is great because I think it helped out, I think, across the organization. And there's like, yeah, there was something, different, unique, extremely valuable, and that we actually have, these creators choosing of all places to kind of go off and build their audience and community as a platform for kind of the distribution of their creativity, that they're choosing to do this on YouTube. That, like, we are so lucky to actually kind of have that. And that's something we talked about a lot. So it's like, let's recognize that, embrace that, and then let's actually grow that. So then it then kind of went to like how can we help you? And then it's like across a lot of different facets. And so what are your creative ambitions? What are the things you're actually trying to go off and do? And then, the other side was going back to the parallel I was drawn before with eBay. And it's like, well, these are also businesses. And I had seen before with power sellers on eBay, what that looked like and the number of staff that they were actually kind of bringing in. So similarly, it was like, okay, what does that look like here? And then I think the other part was like, yeah, if you're operating as a business person, actually, well, how do you look at having your own staff versus coming into this and saying, I'm talent? Because I think there was like this notion of like, if I'm talent, then I have talent management, talent representation. And that's like more the link to kind of like traditional. But it's like, actually, maybe these folks are actually just young creative entrepreneurs. And if you're a young creative entrepreneur and this is a small business,
10 years later, that's how Mr. Beast sees himself.
Yeah. And so I think the way that you would structure your kind of company and the organization would look and feel quite different than if you kind of approach it as talent. And I think in the early days when I was kind of at YouTube, I used to hear from a lot of creators, and I think they were hearing this, and so then they just regurgitated like, oh yeah, I'm talent, I'm just creative, and I don't do anything on the business side. And it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I remember thinking like, I would not actually function that way, to where it is literally out of sight, out of mind for you. Like the business piece is actually what is affording you the opportunity to keep doing what you're doing. So you should actually have a handle on this. Now, yes, you should get support, but you should actually have oversight on this versus like you're just leaving it to someone else actually go make calls for you.
Don't sell yourself short. It's like those hackers from the late 90s who notoriously would agree to crack a game for if you paid their internet bill for the month, because they had no understanding of the economic value of what they were doing for entire industries. And it was just a challenge, and they have an expensive internet bill, pay for it, and it's done. And you're right. Or stories from the music industries from the 50s and 60s with artists getting shafted by the promoters, the radios, the managers, because they wanted to care about music and not about business. But then somebody else will care about it and steal your lunch, which is even more unfair because the money is getting generated with your brand and image and creation anyway, but somebody else is taking it. But everything you say, I realized that moment, these years, were the crystallization of what YouTube became. The discovery platform of the new talents worldwide, because not just in the US, worldwide. It's like there's that reality show, America's Got Talent. In this case, is The World Got Talent. And whatever the tint is, even if it's marble racing, do your thing and find your audience. It's incredible that it's kind of through that moment in 2012 that it kind of crystallized with you that it would become this story. Even Justin Bieber is a discoverist. It is discovered through YouTube.
Yeah. So again, I think it was like, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of development, since then. I mean, there's a lot that was happening kind of before that period as well. But just from my own kind of experience, it was definitely not front and center within the company and the organization. It was the side thing. I think a lot of the focus back then was on content coming from media companies and music labels. That drove, or that commanded a lot of the resource and attention. And the team that actually worked with creators was kind of the side thing. I mean, that's it's changed a lot. Since then, I think for YouTube, and then there's platforms like TikTok that I think are just, core kind of creator, and then the other things are really secondary, on that front. But then I think, the other part was then, I shifted out after a year. I shifted out of marketing and then moved into the content partnerships team at the time when the company, the CEO back then, Salar, was wanting to kind of put a focus on balancing the way he referred to it as delicious and nutritious content. So YouTube had a lot of delicious content, so music and gaming, and wanted to be purposeful actually about having nutritious content, education, news, and then there was early talks at that time about a cross Google initiative to actually look at all of Google's products and services actually from the ground up, built for kids. And YouTube was kind of viewed as like the first one that would actually get that focus. And so for me, it was like, wait, if there's this is like a new area and a new team kind of forming, like I want to be on that team.
The fearless one.
Yeah, so having young kids, I think some of the work I was doing before at Turner with the kids business and Cartoon Network, it was like, this is an amazing, like once in a lifetime kind of opportunity on that front. So I think with education, the thing that I was looking at a lot was like why people actually choose to come to YouTube and actually make education content, which by and large is free and ad supported. And in Asia, there's a notion of star tutors, and I saw this a lot when I lived in Hong Kong, and it's prevalent in Korea, in Japan, so more like North Asia. But I remember then meeting senior executives.
Tutors, you mean teachers who are celebrities?
Yeah, so sorry. So in Hong Kong, I've
lived in Hong Kong, but I'm not familiar with that. Okay,
so you used to see it actually advertised on the side of the buses or the tram. You see these faces of someone, and they're a tutor, but they were kind of like casted into this role. They actually, some of them don't even come from education teaching background, but they're then groomed and kind of trained, into this. And so I think one of the things is like, well, if you see this person advertised, they must be good.
It's like Milli Vanilli. It's like the Milli Vanilli of teaching.
There's a little bit of that. So then I think the other one I was going to reference is there's this executive in Bangkok, and she was telling me once, she's like, I take my daughter for tutoring in Siam Square, and it's like the traffic's horrendous and everything else, and she's like, she actually has the same tutor that I did when I was her age. I was like, okay. And the tutor actually teaches the exact same thing that when I was her age. Okay. And wears the same outfit that they were wearing when I was her age. And I was like, wait, what? And so she said, I take my daughter, she goes into this classroom, and her tutor is on a VHS cassette. And I was like, wait, how much money are you spending a month for this? It is equivalent of like $1,200 US a month. I thought, wow. And she looked at me like, is there a better way? And I was thinking like, must be a better way. Like, this is crazy. Like you're contending with all of this traffic to and from, and she's watching a tape that's like pretty old.
That's VHS.
And she's sitting in this classroom.
We can only improve that. We can only improve the VHS part.
There's got to be some way we can actually do this through digital distribution. So anyway, I was looking at this market, and it's like there's obviously a lot of people who will spend good amount of money on tutors, and the recipients, the kids kind of getting this. But then I was also finding that you had these great people on YouTube that were making wonderful content, but it's all free and ad supported. And so the thing I was kind of seeing is like, how do you actually encourage more people to kind of go down the YouTube route? Because what Google was focusing on was access, and how to actually get their products and services across mobile devices. And so when you would travel to parts of Cambodia or parts of Indonesia, you would see kids actually huddle around the 7-Eleven convenience store where they actually had Wi-Fi access, and on their smartphone, they would actually huddle around and actually watch content on the smartphone. So I was thinking like, well, in some ways they actually have that could actually be the classroom, provided that you actually had local content, like you have content, education content there, but also being delivered in local language. And so not that like you just take US curriculum and then try to shove this into every single country, but then actually how to actually get new things up. So one, I was kind of looking at, or how do we do work with governments and NGOs and other organizations, again, on the supply side, and then knowing the things that Google is kind of doing on that end. So I was doing that. I think on the news front, interesting. It was across different markets, different kind of approaches. But in some areas, what we were cognizant of is that you have state-run media or state-controlled media. And so some people are actually coming to YouTube for that alternative perspective. And then you had the creators actually that were the ones giving that alternative perspective. Then you also had a lot of politicians kind of using for their campaigning, or actually using the platform. And then you also have, like in the Philippines, there's a very large overseas domestic workforce. And so you have people that live in the Middle East or live in Hong Kong or in Singapore. And the news that they care about is actually what's going on in the Philippines. And so then you have broadcasters like ABS-CBN then using YouTube to then reach this overseas kind of workforce to then stay abreast of what's actually going on in their home country and the community there. So there's a lot of this like cross-border kind of activity, but also then things that are in the local market. And then with kids content, that was just something I saw like in front of me at home with my own kids. And the stuff that they were actually kind of gravitating to was not clips and stuff from like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. It was content from people that you only found on YouTube. So Kids TV 123, Super Simple Learning, Mother Goose Club. And so actually on the first one, the creator is actually based in Japan. And I never got to meet the person. He never wanted to meet anybody at Google. And it was kind of like, I've been successful all on my own. I don't know. Like, it was kind of like, I feel like if I meet you guys, you're going to like muck something up, and all the success is actually.
You're going to jinx it. You're going to jinx it.
Yeah.
I encountered a case like that with your former colleague that you introduced to me, Audrey Kim, the other day. Somebody was telling me, oh, we got to find this channel. We got to find this channel. In 2 years, we're trying. And I said, cool. I'm going to ask Audrey from YouTube. She asked around, and they all said, no, we've been trying to. They just don't reply emails. And I was like, really? Even from YouTube?
Well, so that part fascinated me. You have people that are actually earning really good income on this platform. And so when I came into the content partnerships area, I was just thinking like, okay, like, wait, we have no relationship with this person. We need to go and fix this. And there was another creator I remember in Australia that also never wanted to meet anyone. And then I hired someone in my team, and I was like, hey, one thing that you need to figure out how you do is you need to meet this creator. And they were so excited once when they got on a Google Hangout and they forgot to turn off their camera. And they're like, I saw what he looks like as a total recluse. So you have some folks kind of like that. But anyhow, I think the thing I was kind of looking at was how to actually build out part of this kids kind of content ecosystem. And there were great creators coming out of Japan, Korea, India, Malaysia. There's a couple in Malaysia actually created some IP, and their background was the father was in real estate, and he was actually to go retire. And I think his wife was like, no, I don't want you at home. You need something to occupy yourself. And so then he went and partnered with his daughter. And what they were looking at was like, there's just no local content that represents the culture, in our market. And so they created a new animated series and characters that, in just like Malaysia and Indonesia, the content was in Bahasa. This is years back in like 2014, was doing like 1 billion views in those two markets. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And like just massive penetration. So that part was a lot of fun, actually trying to get parts of this ecosystem up. And by the time I relocated back to the States in 2015, we had actually kind of taken note of how much ad revenue was actually flowing through to these guys. And it was a larger number going to all these kids channels actually across the region than what Disney, Nick, or Cartoon Network are actually paying out in Asia for original programming. So we were kind of looking at like, what is our impact actually kind of on the industry? And we were like, we're actually feeling good. Like we're actually having a broader impact, on kids content producers, in the region. And then it wasn't just like coming out of one market and then for the whole region, but then you had a lot of these like local pockets. But in places like Thailand or Indonesia, actually to produce local content and to get it on broadcast TV in some of those markets, you actually have to pay the broadcaster. Like the broadcasters are not commissioning. So
like Transformers paid in Japan to broadcast the series in order to promote the toys. And the same was asked by Angry Birds, but I don't think they did it in China a few years ago when they came with their animation shorts and said, "Oh, we want to give it to you for free, like we do in all the other markets." The China TV told them, "No. This is advertising for your game. You're gonna pay us to wear it." And anyway.
But I think for some of these up and coming creators, it's like, well, if I can't get commissioned, like where's the economic incentive? And so I think with YouTube, it's also you're deficit financing. Like you make content, you put it out, YouTube pays you after the fact. And so then it was getting, I would go to MIPCOM or MIP Junior or Kids Screen, and I would meet some of these producers. And then after after 2-3 years of this, I would see some of the same people pitching the same show. And what they were trying to do was actually get, enough financing secured from all these global broadcasters to go greenlight the thing. And I was thinking like, well, if you put this actually on YouTube, you don't need 52 11-minute episodes. Like no one at YouTube is telling you like, this is, what we actually need. So you can actually go and you could start a lot smaller, and then just get kind of an earlier read that is there any traction on the content that you're kind of developing. And actually, I remember there's a creator in India that actually had their main kids channel, and they were very precious about actually what went up on that channel. And then his team would actually come up on their own with some original kind of IP. And so sometimes like if it wasn't good enough, again, it wouldn't get up on the main channel. But then he thought like, well, I don't want to like waste this and just like have you discard it. But if they get it on YouTube, it's like, well, it's quite easy to go set up a second channel. And so then he started creating additional channels, and so that the team, their side projects, would actually make it there on the second channel. And then there was one creation that one guy in his team had actually made that he had actually thought not good enough for my main channel. So it goes up on the second channel and it blows up and actually became the basis of a toy line, to where actually a major toy company actually leaned into it. And then he was kind of looking at that whole experience saying like, who am I to be, again, the arbiter? And some of the stuff was like, just put it out there and let kids, show you basically with their time, and not just the views, but also the watch time. You could see how much time they're spending in kind of engaging with the content. So that was a whole process as well, like talking with some of these, producers, and I found some of the more successful kids creators actually did not come.
It almost sounds like this Frank Zappa black and white video of who killed the music industry, but in reverse, where he says, in the beginning we were trying everything and we didn't know what we were doing, and then some guys thought they knew what they were doing, and they were the deciders of tastes for everyone. And it seems like your friend went through it in reverse. Like he was the decider of tastes, and then he realized, oh no, YouTube decides better than I do. Should just throw it out there and see what sticks.
Yeah, yeah, and I know before it's like you have. I mean, if you're making a TV show, you're doing that for a specific kind of time slot, or if you're the broadcast, if you're the programmer for that network, like for Cartoon Network in
You
Asia,
might
I think.
even have to care about the advertisers at that slot.
Well, there's that, but what I was going to say is that I think at that time, Cartoon Network was only making 2 original shows in Asia, and because the rest of their program grid was basically taken up by what was coming out of the U.S. from Cartoon Network Studios and Warner Brothers Studios. So as like an original creator, like again, they only had 2 slots to fill. There was obviously way more potential content kind of for that. And then the other thing I remember in Southeast Asia is that they had 1 channel feed for the entire region, right? But then, I mean, having lived out there for a while, it's like, the Thai culture to the Vietnamese culture to the Indonesian culture, the Filipino culture, the Malay culture, like different cultures, languages on the Southeast Asia piece. Again, the broadcast, because the cost to kind of run local channels, it's cost prohibitive to kind of go off and do that. So they have 1 feed for the whole region. Then what I was kind of seeing with YouTube is like, you're working on it on a different kind of starting point. So you can go put out a Thai channel, a Vietnamese channel, a Malay channel. You can start to tweak some of the content and be more, you can adapt that actually for the market. And it's you're not playing the same game. So it's like, why even try to? And so that was a part that I found just fascinating kind of on that end. But then the other part was like, well, these broadcasters and these media companies can monetize in a lot of different ways, right? So they get the carriage fees, they get the advertising fees, consumer products, live events, and other things. And so then the same thing was like for some of these creators, it's like, oh, okay, you're out there building awareness, reach, and engagement, and building a community of very large numbers. But now, how do you start to turn on some of these other monetization levers that someone like Turner Broadcasting would actually have, or Viacom would actually have for its own channels, and that was I was starting down that kind of that path, and then I got asked to relocate to the U.S. and take on a different role, but that was the beginning kind of there, and then I was then working on kind of some similar things, but then broader and not just focused on kids, news, and education.
But I think what you were toying with and snowballing there was the beginning of YouTube Kids, right? And what it then became after you left with former Turner colleagues of yours, if I remember right.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I was there on that founding team, and when we were kind of conceiving like, what is this product going to be? The whole user experience, and then it was like, okay, we should actually go have some original content at the time that we actually launched this thing, and it was like, okay, we're going to launch it in the U.S. first. But I remember thinking like, well, no one ever said actually where the original content has to come from, just that it has to serve the U.S. market. So I came back to the region after that first offsite, and I said to my team like, hey guys, we should move quick. And the quicker we are to go and shape original programs, the more of that budget we're going to get for our partners. And so I had worked on a number of originals, but one I think that you'll be familiar with is Fruit Ninja.
Fruit Ninja and
so,
Dr. Rogue.
Yeah, so I was aware, I already knew Half Brick and from my days at kind of at Turner, Chanel and the team, and I had actually reached out and I said, hey, is there any planning already going on about how you guys are looking at adapting the character in the IP from this game into animation, whether it's feature or series? And he said no. Or there's been some conversation, but it's not something that they're going to prioritize and focus on. But there's the company that was actually developing their game trailers had interest in that. So it was like, why don't you two go talk? And what I was interested in at the time was to test out, because they had like 50 million monthly active users. And what I was thinking is like, if you agree to actually embed the YouTube player, and we actually make good content, not ads, I bet that we can actually get pretty good retention on that content. And if we get good retention on that content,
Grubbs did it with their first cinematic trailer, and it brought 100 million views over 2 years.
yeah. Well, I was aware that I was aware of that kind of experience as well, because that was actually happening, I think, around the same time. And so what I was looking at was, is there a way that we can actually go and trigger YouTube's recommendation engine? And so, because Half-Brick and Fruit Ninja had very low presentation on YouTube at the time. And so I was like, could we actually make this thing, you guys actually help firehose users to it through your mobile game? And again, if the content can stand up, this thing will just take over. And YouTube will just start automatically kind of recommending this to other people because they'll see it as, good content that actually has good retention. And so it put that whole thing together. And so it was a fun process of getting the whole kind of creative team together, and then got that whole project kind of greenlit. Ended up actually going to YouTube Premium. So sat behind the paywall, other than the first episode. That first episode, I think, has like north of 500 million views.
At some point, it was the most viewed video on YouTube Kids, wasn't it? Just a few years ago.
But actually, a few of our originals in Asia at that time were actually some of the better performing in that first year for YouTube Kids. But I think for a lot of the partners that we worked with, it was the kind of first time that they were actually working with writers. And so we were kind of like, all right, you're doing royalty-free nursery rhymes. You got a lot of views actually on this content. You have characters that you keep showing over and over in these videos. Why don't we just go and tell the story of actually who those characters are and build that out? And again, not against like royalty-free nursery rhymes, actually invest into original IP. That actually can start to kind of build out your brand, the IP, some franchise development opportunity there. And again, for them, it was actually going through a new process of collaborating with preschool writers or writers that actually would write for that primary school kind of audience, other kind of animation studios, on that process, and from character design, development, world design, and all the way through. So it was a good opportunity to kind of upskill a lot of these creators actually in the region. So it was a fortunate time to kind of be there, when all that was starting to kind of come together, and there wasn't really a playbook.
I love the way, actually, I finally understand today why YouTube Kids started out of Singapore.
No, it didn't start in Singapore. No, it started in the US. I'm just saying, like, I was a part of that team. I was part of the launch team.
It was created from Singapore, or initiated from Singapore?
Some of it. No.
And that's because you said, they didn't say where it has to come from. I never understood why so much content came out of Asia in the beginning, but now I do.
I mean, our whole thing was like the US is a great market for engagement, monetization. I mean, it was already the case in television. There's a lot of great content that comes out of Korea, Japan, France. And that then comes into the US. And so it was like, why should this be any different if we're making original stuff for YouTube Kids? So I just started with that point. It was like, you need to convince me why we can't versus I need to convince you why we should. And so it was like, we're just going to do it. And then that's what I told, it's like, let's just go shape this stuff. And we got a bunch of things like ready and shaped and ready to go. And then we got them greenlit, financed, and produced. And so, it was fun.
The intrapreneur spirit, entrepreneur from the inside.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of just trying to figure out like how decisions get made and who makes those decisions, and how you. There's a lot of just like pre-packaging, and like I want to make this, and I want to get this to an easy yes. So you're working out like what are people like the metrics and the variables that they're actually paying attention to. So we did reverse engineer a bunch of stuff, and then made sure that the programs and the projects that we were kind of putting up, like they ticked all those boxes. And I mean, I got 3 shows produced at Greenlight, I think in like 90 seconds. Yeah, it was a lot of money that got agreed to in a very short amount of time. But it was all the prep work.
How
right?
many millions per second?
What's that?
How many millions per second? All right, but then you said a few minutes ago you moved to the US, which is when we finally met. When you get into what was your super prestigious role? Top content creators, head of top content creators, global head of top content creators. Wasn't it something like that?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. So that was in late 2015. I relocated. So yeah, I took on a global role. I was doing that actually for a few months out of Singapore. It was pretty clear that's like the worst location to be based in for a West Coast based company, when all like key meetings happen like in the early afternoon, which is like horrific.
It's hard to be in Hollywood with video calls, right?
Yeah, well, it's all the product folks are up in San Bruno, and then folks want to get out of that office, by like 5 o'clock, to go get the shuttle, so that's like 8 a.m. In Asia, and so if you want to catch people before the end of the day, you're doing stuff before 8 a.m. And then some of the meetings don't really kind of get into gear until 10 a.m. Pacific, so that's like 1 a.m. in Asia. And so I used to start my week every week actually with a team meeting that, depending on daylight savings, started either at midnight or 1 a.m. And so then it would finish at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And then some colleague would be like, "Oh, you're still up. Can I get you for a little bit?" And I was like, "Oh, really?" So then you get into a conversation, and then you're wired, right? And then you're trying to like then wind down, and it's getting close to like 3 a.m. And then you have like an 8 o'clock, and then to have it, be back in the office at 8, it's like I'm back out the door at 7. And so I was like, all right, I got a 4-hour turnaround, and that's how I start my week. And so it was just then playing catch up with the body clock, for the rest of the week, get to the weekend. And then I was traveling every other week, somewhere around the region or around the world. And so that was also a warp on the mind and the body.
Pacific time zone to Asia is the worst time zone combination you can get. It's really too far away from one another. Yeah.
But I feel now, after spending 15 years in the region, since I've been back, I like to think that I'm one of the more hospitable Americans, and that I actually take early morning calls, and I take very late night calls. Like I'll do a midnight call here Pacific time, and it's like 3 p.m. over there, and they're kind of like, wait, what time is it? I don't know. For me, I've been so used to it over the years.
The Asian lifestyle, because I get that too from my Hong Kong years, for having been on the other side, and also because, let's face it, in those cities, business goes on late night anyway, right? So yeah, we've been through these vibrant cities where you had to play with time zones, and now you're mindful of the other. I gotta tell you though, whenever I know I will have to schedule a call with Singapore or Hong Kong from the other side of the world now in Colombia, I'm like, shit, this is one of those. It's gonna be hard to schedule this one.
Well, I had so when I moved here to the U.S., actually all my direct reports were, they were in Sydney, Sao Paulo, New York, and London, and then I'm in L.A. It was so hard to actually get that entire team together on one call. Like someone's getting the loose end of that, and so I had my colleague who was in Sydney. I think she would take the call sometimes. It was like at 4 a.m. her time. And then the worst thing was, it's like if someone else was trying to do a last minute reschedule, because they've already gotten up. Yeah. It was.
There should be a fine for this. There should be a system that gets.
Yeah, but that was the thing. It's just like, hey, there's commitment. You're showing up. Everyone else needs to be showing up as well. And the other side was also like, you're there, so make sure that you're engaging. And I think I'd seen a lot come out of time in Asia that, I think folks are generally more kind of passive. And so when you get on these like global calls, there's a lot more talking going on from the Americans or the Europeans, and the Asians are actually the quieter bunch. But then for me being out in Asia for so long, I always thought that like actually the stuff coming out of Asia was the forward thinking and innovation. And so I used to like press my colleagues. I'm like, you guys need to speak up. And if you don't, I mean, I'll do it for you, or tee stuff up, and just make sure that folks are actually kind of aware of this incredible work that you're actually doing, that I think is actually ahead of things over here. And I think over the last year, I hear a lot more than I ever did in my career about China, and people here in the U.S. looking to China for kind of like some window into like what's next. Like that to me is like fascinating, having worked in the region for so long.
I see the same thing in mobile marketing and mobile monetization. Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan, it's the future. Whatever you see now, it was 2 years ago over there, and whatever you see there today, expected in 2 years from now in Western mobile games. You're right, they try things, they innovate, they have that fearless element that you have, you and I, that let's just do it and we'll see. And that's how you stumble upon new things. And they are so sophisticated and advanced with digital.
I think with it, it's like there's been a number of public listings in China or of Chinese companies here in the U.S. on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, and then what ByteDance has kind of done with TikTok. So I think there's been broader recognition or appreciation of companies that have actually grown to extremely large enterprise values. And some of these businesses, again, are just in China. So it's like, well, hey, we need to understand this a bit more, and then maybe there's something for us to learn there and apply that here. Whereas then I think on like mobile messaging and things like that, like with what it was QQ first, and WeChat, the Kakao, Line, like those.
The big game changer between TikTok and WeChat is that WeChat is that local success, that regional, continental success, that if you haven't lived in Asia, you kind of dismissive of it, because even when they tried to push it into Europe with Lionel Messi, with a big commercial campaign through the World Cup, it didn't kind of work because WhatsApp came first, and although WhatsApp is a lesser product, that's it. People use it now, and you know how these network effects work. But WeChat remained that big unicorn from China in China, and then Tencent, the group that acquires a lot of company, but WeChat never could quite break. TikTok is not a global phenomenon that hits everywhere, and that's the difference now. I think that we can see, oh, China can pass the borders and exports to us.
When I was living in the region, I mean, I would communicate to friends in Korea on Kakao, in Japan on Line, in China on WeChat, and then the rest of the region on WhatsApp. And then I moved back here, and then I was like chatting with my brothers and some other folks. And they're kind of like, why are you forcing me to like communicate with you on WhatsApp? Like, it's just text. And I was thinking like, man, that's what we were doing like over 15 years ago. We've kind of moved beyond that into these different kind of messaging platforms. But yeah, there's still a lot of communication I find here in the States just through basic text, and not these mobile messaging platforms, on that front. But the way that they've actually kind of grown and lots of different services and things. And so I find, in China through WeChat, it's like I'm doing my banking, I'm doing my navigation, commerce, payments, peer-to-peer payments, lots of
which came out of an economic constraint. Because if I'm not wrong, in the US, you always had free SMS, free texting. In Europe and Asia, you had to pay. You had like 15 SMS a month or something like that. And after that, you had to pay. And it was a few cents per SMS. you can imagine if you're texting with your girlfriend in an angry argument, how many dollars you're spending over that. So for us, WhatsApp was a clear economic, in WeChat as well. But then once you are in my phone and I use you every day, WeChat and Line evolved and offered more services. But the hook, the Trojan horse, was really free SMS, which in America was never a feature. Well, it was normal. Of course, it's free SMS. Why would I download an app for that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's that, and then there's also on the voice side. When I saw that when I was at eBay, and the company bought Skype, and so kind of like some early days there on VoIP, but then getting that later through some of the mobile apps, and when I used to travel around for Turner, I remember getting a lot of grief from finance because my mobile roaming bill, it was like $600, $800 a month or something like that, and they're like, can you please bring this thing down? But it's like, yeah, I'm traveling, someone calls me, I accept the call, and I'm paying for that, roaming on voice. And, like the data was just like, forget that. And then we used to use Blackberries back then.
I once lost $10 just turning on a phone. Just turning on a phone and loading the history of messages. Boom, $10.
Yeah, so I think with these, there's been a lot of benefits on that front, but anyway, all good times.
All right, then when you get into the top creator stuff, that's how we met, and I actually still have to thank you for introducing me to Harley from Epic Mealtime, who in the meantime has become a friend since that began shoot, and has accepted to be a guest on the show. So Harley, if you're listening, you're next. And you said something earlier that happens with us in Italy. You said you had people in the audience that later on won awards. And with Harley, we had a moment like that. We were hanging out in Italy at night after the Pagani shoot, and he met a fan of his in Italy, an Italian guy, 17-year-old, told him, "Oh, I love your videos, and I'm making some videos myself. If you could like them and subscribe, I have 1,000 subscribers." 3 years later, the Italian kid has 1.3 million subscribers in Italy and is a creator of his own. And those tiny moments of YouTube, when you meet the guy, or what happened with you with Lisa Koshy. I remember the first time you told me, keep an eye on Lisa Koshy, keep an eye on Lisa Koshy. She was like what, 500,000 subscribers? And then you brought her to the Olympics and all that, and now she's one of the biggest stars on the planet. And I love that about the platform.
No, it is a lot. I mean, it's been a blessing, I think, to be able to collaborate with a lot of very passionate kind of creative people, actually from all around the world, and are making like a variety of content. I think that was also one of the. I was really enjoying my life and everything in living in Asia, and I kind of contemplated maybe I was just going to stay there for the rest of my working career. And I had no design to kind of actually move back to the States, and then the opportunity presented itself, and I was like, well, I still get to have access to the Asia region, but now I have more of a job scope to actually get deeper into the U.S. Actually, now I have job scope to get deeper into Latin America, and then into Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So that was super intriguing to me, and then to kind of look at like, okay, how do I take some of the experience and the lessons and things that I kind of amassed from my time in Asia, and what we were just talking about before, like where I felt very strongly that there's a lot of innovation actually occurring in Asia and then coming to the rest of the world, whether the rest of the world actually was recognizing it or not, that it actually originated in Asia. It's like I knew it did.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, I want to keep a finger on that, and then help kind of be a bridge for that kind of work coming into other parts of the world, and then just being a connector And it's like, yeah, there's bright ideas and innovation happening in all corners. And so how to like recognize that, shape that, embrace it, and then actually bring it to other parts. And so, Brazil, I just remember, is a great market for community engagement. Japan was a phenomenal market for monetization. There was also exceptionally high kind of engagement from a creator kind of upload perspective coming out of the Middle East. And then just, I think, the diversified kind of monetization that was occurring here in the US. And so I found like each region had something slightly kind of different to learn from, and then, see again, how can we profile that, case study that, and kind of then bring that into other markets. So that was a lot of fun kind of doing that. And then also just continue to kind of down the path of actually trying to build out original programs and initiatives that were geared towards either someone's creative ambition or someone's business ambition. So it varied on, I think, the time and the market and what that was. But I was doing that then for a number of years, and then a new opportunity kind of presented itself to me to step out of the company and set something up actually from scratch.
I was about to say, in a way, you're still doing that now, but focusing on the next trend, and with your new company, right? CreatorPlus, and also Next 10 Ventures, but
yeah, so I think
which is an investment vehicle, but CreatorPlus is definitely fascinating.
So yeah, the first thing was Next 10, and so what I was thinking about, and I had some folks in my ear kind of on this, was like, hey, it's just a recognition that the jobs that I would kind of gravitate to, or the opportunities, were where things were somewhat new and needed to actually be shaped. And so I was doing that, do that within the company, shape that, kind of transition it to other people, and then kind of move on to the next. And every 4 or 5 years, I would just shift companies in terms of where I was actually doing that kind of incubation work. So it was kind of put to me, it was like, well, why don't you do that or keep doing that, but like not for the next big tech company, going from like Yahoo to eBay to then to Time Warner, then to Google.
Rather for your next big tech company.
Well, that was the thing. And so I was like, yes, I kind of get that. That's not like, I didn't think I was missing out on anything particularly. I actually quite enjoyed actually doing it, incubating things from within these larger companies. And my scope had continued to kind of grow over the course of my career. So that was all good. But then I was also kind of seeing, when I thought about it more, it's like, well, you could spend a lot of time internally just trying to get alignment and agreement, on things. You could spend months to a year, kind of on that. And also certain things that I thought were kind of necessary and needed for creators actually required product or engineering resource. And me being on the business side, it's like there was no hope. And I was like, the business side in Google does not inform the product engineering. It's the other way around. So I was like, okay, I'm in the wrong side of the house to actually be kind of driving.
A company started by engineers.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, this is what it is. Get it, accept it. But I guess what I was thinking about is, and so there's that. I think then the other thing was also just the size and scope of the company, and where it was choosing to kind of prioritize and focus on certain things. And so I just found increasingly difficult to get new things off the ground, to go and like, just put it into the market and go test it. So we talked before about like with kids content, you can spend years in shaping some 52 episode, animated series that will cost you north of $10 million, or start smaller, let the consumer kind of, give you feedback and guide you. So things like that. But there was other things I was looking at where it was like, how do we just start this in a smaller manner? But again, if it required, some product or engineering, work, you have folks who are kind of doing this as like a side thing. It was like, how do we get this onto like the main track, from that side? So anyway, that was in my mind of like, is there a different way to go off and incubate things? And so could I still stay super plugged in, to this kind of creator ecosystem? The other thing that was running through my mind at the time was, I had this vantage point from YouTube, which is a phenomenal vantage point, but it was just one. And what I had seen again in my career was like when I was at Yahoo, we talked about this before, where it was like people equated Yahoo to the internet. And so you then sort of believe this, of like, oh yeah, I must know everything about the internet because I work at Yahoo. And then when I left and went to eBay, it was like, oh man, no, that's so false. There's like way more obviously to it, but then when you're in that bubble, you just you get fed that and it just reinforces itself. And so I think also at that time, like YouTube was the very large. I mean, it's a very large platform now, but it's like just bigger market share, everything else at the time. And so I think there was just a discount on like what else is kind of out there that's a merit. But again, you spend time with some of these creators and you kind of see that like they don't actually want to have all their eggs in this YouTube basket. They want some diversification.
Nobody wants.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to have their eggs in the same basket.
Yeah. So they're a lot more vocal.
What if they demonetize me? What if they deplatform me? What
Yeah.
if they ban me? It happens all the time nowadays as well.
Yeah. So there was, I mean, it's a lot more vocal now. There was, inklings of that or how that was kind of moving, back then. And so the other thing I was thinking about is that like even some of on the enterprise kind of tech and tools, if YouTube is going to go off and build something, it's then serving YouTube. But if a creator actually wants to be multi-platform, it's probably best not to have it actually built and run by YouTube. And the kind of case in point I saw was FameBit, startup that was a marketplace connecting creators and brands, and actually worked across a lot of different platforms. And then when Google bought it, Facebook cut their API. And it just became more of a YouTube solution than a cross-platform solution. So that was the piece where I was then thinking,
and
like,
now I think it's got written off as a loss, and it's closed FameBit, isn't it?
It's been transformed into
swallowed.
It's been transformed into something else within the company. But yeah, so I think the thing I was looking at that, I was like, well, I think there's actually some runway here. That even if YouTube set its sights on something, it's not like game over. Like, oh darn it, YouTube's actually onto this, because again, they're just going to solve the YouTube piece. But as much as the creator actually wants to be across multiple platforms, there's a role for an independent company to kind of be. And as this ecosystem then kind of grows, that's actually going to be healthier for the creators. It's also going to be healthier for these companies that are then providing the tech and the tools and the services there. So that was the part where I was like, there's actually something here to then just focus on this. And I think folks I was talking to at the time, when they would think about like this ecosystem and third party or enterprise companies, it was largely multi-channel networks. And some would kind of view this as like, didn't go so well. And so it was kind of like, there was something before, it's kind of been done. And it's like, we're moving on to like something else. And I was just thinking, no. Like that was just like
gone wrong.
Well, that was just like
short term. It was
like that's just the first inning, from that side. And so it was like, all right, is there a parallel here to, .com companies in the 90s, right? And so you had a lot of different people kind of moving into the space, a lot of things actually getting figured out. Yeah, we talked about this a lot before, whereas the course correction in the spring of 2000, but over the last 20 plus years, there's been a lot of companies started after that have done phenomenally well. And so it was like, well, is there a parallel here?
Usually, I've even seen it with on the cryptocurrency side of things. The first ins might be the greediest one, and they're in it for the short-term buck, and that's why it's built improperly. The second generation wants to build it to last. And I think there's a lot of that going on here too.
Yeah. So
the first MCNs, I've worked with a few of them. I'm going to say if you can't, but the first MCNs were dreadful to work with. And the value they were adding, the service they were adding, both to the talent and the clients, was way too often negative and counterproductive. And it's because they were all focused on the numbers to exit. So not on the client, not on the talent, but on the company's valuation when you exit, and that's all quantity based rather than quality.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to one parent, and their child was in one of these networks that was actually getting sold, and they were kind of a marquee name, for that sale, and then they were trying to leave. They were trying to leave the network, and then they got threatened with a lawsuit if they were to leave, and getting pressured. And there was some interesting stuff. And I remember through that episode, it was like, oh yeah, there was a lot of packaging on the optics. It's again, like I think with the .coms, it was page views, and it wasn't maybe right. And so then with this, it's views and subscriber counts, and not like actual like business fundamentals of revenue, EBITDA, and things like this, and looking at cash flow and growth rate.
They called it the new economy back then. You remember they called it the new economy to get away with it.
Yeah. So I think for me it was opportunity presented itself to kind of step out and then actually have some financial backing, so to go create a new vehicle that would have a hand in ideating, incubating some new businesses, and then the secondary focus. Actually, I wouldn't even call it. It wasn't even a focus. It was like just a secondary thing, was to support other founders and their startups that were going to be growing in this ecosystem. It was like, well, if we could be helpful to them, that actually kind of grows. It strengthens the overall kind of ecosystem. It's going to be better for everyone. And so it was like, hey, that's not what we're going to go focus on, but we'll allocate some budget that way to then go and back some of these early stage companies. And then maybe the things that we're going to want to focus on, like we can actually have some strategic alignment actually between the companies. And there were things that I had done before at Turner, or actually at eBay and YouTube, where I was across startups and I would help them out. But like I was never even thinking at the time, it's like, oh, I should get equity in exchange for what I'm doing for you. And so I think with this, it was like, well, we just created a company from scratch, and so I guess we could kind of set our own roadmap and rules. And so it's like, yeah, okay, if we can get on the cap table and we can invest in these companies as well, then again, it was just looking at like how we grow the overall kind of ecosystem. So that was kind of that. I think then from the early incubation effort, there's a lot of I would say missteps early on that front on the incubation end, and so definitely learned a lot in kind of operating in effect actually a startup studio or a venture studio, and then kind of spending time with others that were kind of doing this, and then seeing kind of their models and structures, and then actually kind of coming back and it's like, oh, we need to actually recalibrate, how do we actually have a good structure that is attractive to people who actually want to be a part of something this early stage, and actually attract the entrepreneurs that are really looking for value creation, than just a job that has a paycheck and a benefits plan. So there was some learning there that was hard but good. And then I think last year started down the path in a slightly different way on building. And so I started one company late last year called Collide, that's in the marketing advertising space, and creative marketing, and actually working with companies largely outside the US and actually mainly in Asia that are actually trying to grow their brand awareness into regions like North America, Europe, and Africa. And those companies actually look at creator marketing not as the last thing to kind of sort out to a whole campaign, but actually somewhat the first. And it's like, ooh, love working with those types of marketers. So you're at you're at the table when the strategy and the brief is actually being written, and actually in the team that's actually in Collide is involved on strategy formation, and they're writing the briefs, not just receiving the brief.
I gotta tell you, there are more and more companies who in the West too, for whom influencer marketing is going up the totem pole and have it now first, top of mind when strategizing for a new launch, or it changed. It's no longer the last thought everywhere. Some of them, they're late.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, when I was at Yahoo, and like the sales team I was working with used to give away keywords to search, right? They put no value on it. to then like, that's the crux of Google's business. And there's a lot of companies now that have always on search. They're advertising 365 days a year, and it's been optimized. So like, this isn't a cost, this is a revenue driver, because they actually know how to optimize that marketing. I think I see a similar path kind of going for creator marketing, where it is not this like, oh, I need to test things out and I don't know if it's actually going to work. It's like, no, for certain demographics, you want to reach them. Like, I look at the kids market now. You're better off actually being, again, on a platform like YouTube and working with some of these creators than you are, I think, on television, on Cartoon Network, Nick, or I mean, Disney doesn't even accept advertising, so it's really just Cartoon Network and Nick, where you would actually advertise on the television dial, and but they keep their viewership just keeps declining year after year. Again, where the digital consumption is going up, and so there's a lot of consumption on Netflix, but there's no advertising, right? So if I'm a company actually trying to market to parents with young kids, how do I build awareness? Can't do it through Netflix. On Amazon, and if they're watching content without ads, it's like that's actually not good for me. If it's been declining rapidly kind of through television, also not good for me. And you have this other space that YouTube just keeps going up and up. So there's a lot more scrutiny on how marketing is kind of done there. But again, there is a massive audience of engaged kind of kids and parents. I mean, I have that in my own house, from that side. So that's like Collide's kind of playing in that space. And then CreatorPlus, you referenced before, that was a company got off the ground earlier this year. And so through CreatorPlus, is building out a new film studio and a streaming platform to finance, produce, and distribute new feature films with top creators. And CreatorPlus is actually taking the role actually of the premiere window. So instead of actually going to the movie theater to go watch your film, you're going to be doing that actually at home. And so the first place that these films will premiere will be through CreatorPlus in a transactional model. So it's not ad supported, it's not subscription, it's transactional VOD. Just as you pay money to go watch a film in the theater, you go do so here. And I think what so my partner in that, so with Collide, my partner there is a woman, Amy, and with CreatorPlus, partner is Jonathan. And so on the CreatorPlus side, I think what Jonathan and I were, talking through, last year when we were kind of coming together on this, with the pandemic and theaters being shut, we're looking at this and it's like, well, when things subside and stuff starts to open back up, is the market going to revert back to where it was before? And lots of analysts have opined kind of on this. We also took the view of it's not going to revert back to where it was before. There's still an intent, I think, to consume. It's just going to be done in a different manner. So if there's a redistribution of some of that money, which in North America is north of $3 billion, I think that we've kind of seen estimated of redistribution. It's like, hey, there's an addressable market for us a multi-billion-dollar one for us to go and play into. And then actually working with, this new generation of creative talent that, are super savvy and actually how they build large engaged audiences. And so we're also looking at this as saying, okay, the platforms that they're building this community on are somewhat then restrictive on storytelling. If you do this on TikTok, it's like you got a time constraint. YouTube, you also have there's kind of an economic constraint of how much you would reasonably want to go and spend to then make that back in AdSense money. And then on the sponsored content side of things, the brands now, and actually with the companies that are working with them, I think it's less of you just do what you want to do. And I think with bigger spends, it's like, we actually want to be, we have a brief, we're looking for a certain type of content. And so work with us kind of on this thing. So if you got this passion project, it could be sitting there, in the drawer or on the shelf for some time. And how do I actually get this thing properly financed and do it the way that I want to do that actual project? And so we were kind of seeing, just having worked with creators for a long time, that certain people were very creatively driven, have these passion projects, want to bring these things to life. So then it's like, hey, is there a different way or a different vehicle of which to actually go off and do this? And then being cognizant of the market that we're kind of playing in and how things have kind of been reshaped. And so I think, yeah, pre-pandemic, whenever I would actually bring this topic up with folks, it was like, yeah, you should just go make movies and put them into theaters, and then just get the people involved just to market that as an influencer, and then just push people into cinema. And I was thinking like, no. But like, if you did digital distribution, you can actually follow that transaction all the way through. You can optimize that, and that becomes actually your customer, right?
And it's immediate. It's immediate as well.
Yeah,
click here, do the transaction before you change your mind. No lining up, no taking out the cars, no parking.
Yeah, so I think like when I was at Turner and doing games, like we had lots of, we had free users, and then we had free games with microtransactions. So we had that subset that were paying money, and we were trying to pay attention to like who are these users, and spending quite a lot of money actually on these games or engaging with the IP. And so we looked at kind of customer segmentation and trying to pay attention to that, and we were doing that as like the IP owner. And so I think on the same front, it's like you have these creators with like large audiences, but then there's a similar opportunity for segmentation, and then actually how to know how to recognize and then engage, from that standpoint. So I just saw a lot of advantages if you actually had a digital platform for distribution, because you can actually play around with this. Whereas if we're sending you kind of offline, we lose track of that, and it's harder to kind of know for sure like how you're kind of engaging on that end. So that was a whole bit. I think it was just a bit of kind of market timing maybe, and that like it's it's something that I've seen this desire from creators for a number of years. But as I said, I think with some of the folks in the market pre-pandemic, we're not putting a lot of weight actually on digital distribution. And then during the pandemic, it was like, oh yeah, well, no one's actually going to the cinema. And so, yeah, things are changing. Look at this younger kind of audience, and how tied are they into actually wanting to keep watching films in the movie theater. And so when people kind of say like, oh, that's the way to do it, they're generally of an older demographic. And I don't hear that from my kids who are 7 to 12 years old. So I was like, okay, I look at them, play them out for the next 10 years. Where is that market kind of going? We'll go place a bet that the digital distribution is going to be a larger and larger kind of share of that. And
we've seen it in the video games industry with the arcade centers, which were the way to play video games, the coin-op machines, and in Japan especially. And it kept going down and down and down as console revenues went up, because when you have Street Fighter 2 in the comfort of your home, and you can eat, smoke, have fun with friends, drink, which you can't do in a theater, and you can play it more often, you can replay it more often, and there's a parallel there. And the arcade became this, it became more and more over the top, that you had to have, the DDR, the Dance Revolution mat, or the big driving cars. You had to have the stuff that is too expensive to have at home, which I guess is the way cinema is going to go. It's going to be a big spectacle full of equipment that you couldn't buy in your home. But for watching just a movie, that's it. Once you grow into the habit of digital, you don't lose it. And we see the same in mobile game consumption now. Everybody thought, oh, but when people go back out, will that mobile game peak come down? We're looking at the data the last 30 days. It's not. It's still growing. It's still growing. Now that you played your favorite game, invested in it, are you going to stop playing it because you get out again? Nah, you're going to play it on the bus, on the plane, but you're still playing it.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I think on top of just like the playing and that engagement, I mean, the other thing I'll just kind of note that Jonathan and I thought a lot about actually with the construction of the company was like having a firm footing in product and engineering. So like that's actually his background is in product management. And so we felt very important that we actually have that skill set kind of in-house from the get-go, or from the leadership position. So that we're like having more control over this product and platform that we actually want to go off and build. And so then thinking about like, how do we bring together this content consumption experience, but also community and also commerce. which today I think in this area is fragmented across. You go different places for different things, and so it's like, well, could we attempt to actually kind of bring some of this stuff together? What does that actually look like? And actually, if we have those capabilities, what does that then do to kind of inspiring the creative storytelling of the creative partners that we actually have? What things could we then entertain, and how stories are actually kind of crafted and delivered? That again, maybe on another platform, no one is even entertaining that or not, nor asking them. It was like, I need a finished product. It needs to be in this kind of file format. Just give it to me, and I will distribute. How people choose to engage from a community aspect, yeah, that's actually going to happen on Twitter or somewhere else. If there is any, audience or fan appreciation actually of, the consumer products and merchandise kind of related to this, yeah, that's also going to happen somewhere else, and downstream. And so we're kind of like, what if we actually, all that stuff is actually fair game, and we were very mindful of that kind of up front, and then we bring people into the organization who are thinking, or just aware and thinking that holistically. And we were kind of looking around, I was like, we actually don't know too many things we could point to that are like, that's exactly kind of what we're trying to do. So again, there's no playbook. I don't know, but for me, it's like, that's kind of how I've been rolling for most of my career.
Classic band, go fearless.
Is you're going to be making this stuff up as we go along, and it's been fun. So I think for me now, it's like, I'm connected to a lot of companies. I think within the investment side, it's about 20 companies now, and get a solid amount of deal flow, every day.
And I think you've greenlit your first project, didn't you? Didn't you announce something last week or a couple of weeks ago?
We actually just wrapped our first film. We just wrapped production on the first film, Jane, which is a YA psychological thriller. Madeline Petch is starring and also producing. Melissa Leo and Chloe Bailey are two other of the actresses in the film. First time female director. So that's slated to be released late Q1 2022. And then we have
reveal of the platform then.
Correct. Yeah, and then there's more. So the goal is to get 6 films out next year. So
you gotta come back to tell us how it went and how it's going.
Yeah, I can do that. And so but it's good. There's a lot of things in development right now on that front to then kind of meet the goals and objectives we have for content releases in 2022. Starting to kind of look at some things that are just timing wise are going to take more time to develop. So more realistically, probably release in 2023. Have a global investor base actually for CreatorPlus. So Collide actually, when I got that off the ground, it was a very small kind of like pre-seed investment. The business is tracking really well. It's profitable. And so haven't really had the urgency to actually go and go raise money just to keep it kind of running. I think if we're going to put more capital into that business, it's really for acceleration. Then for CreatorPlus, did a financing round that we closed back in March, and then that actually had a larger collection of investors from around the world, from India, Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Africa, UK, and then across the US. And I think with that, I think what's of note is, our interest actually into look at international markets, which has been the story.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, are you going to focus on American creators or do what you did in the past to just go worldwide and find talent wherever it lies?
Yeah, so we're already working with some creators in Australia. I think right now we're starting with content that is
in English.
It's going to produce and be released in English, but that's not to say over time that we actually wouldn't look at content in Portuguese, that resonates really well in Brazil or in Spanish for Spanish Latin America, and Arabic for the Middle East, Hindi for India, Japanese, etc. So again, I'd seen that firsthand, like on YouTube. I was talking about that before, again in the Southeast Asia markets, where you kind of hit local culture, local language, and some of that IP that was mentioned before in the kids space, like just from Malaysia, doing 1 billion views in 2 countries, right? And so I just know from that experience that like you don't need to always go global to actually make it commercially viable. You can really, you can go deep into some of these markets. So very, very mindful of that. But I think we're also kind of looking at where stories and culture can actually cross geography.
As a native French, I always laugh in influencer meetings when I name Cyprien and Norman, and nobody ever heard of them. And they have like 8 million subscribers, or maybe 10 by now, and 3 to 4, 5 million views per video in France. And in France, they are like PewDiePie or Mr. Beast. And if you don't speak French, never heard of them. Never heard.
Yeah.
And you get the same with German or Fernand Flo in Spanish. It was the same with singers when I was growing up. You had some people who were super famous in France, but as soon as they passed the border, nobody knows them. But I was about to ask you one more question. Yeah, don't you feel, I'm happy for you as a friend because you're having a blast, and it was a great idea at the right time, but it makes me surprised. Don't you feel like Hollywood missed the boat on this generation of creators? Aren't you surprised that the majors didn't sign these creators for their feature film projects and went after them hard like you did? Or was it just that they are from different generations talking a different language and it couldn't have been a marriage?
I'd say a few things. I think one is there have been a lot of creators actually approached by larger studios for projects, but in some cases they're being approached more for their influencing capability than I would say they're creative.
Poster boy. Don't look at the script.
Well, no, I'm going to slot you in a secondary small role, and then you will be my influencer marketer, and you will help promote this thing that I'm doing.
I've seen that a lot on animation movies. Quick voiceover for a minute there, but we overuse that 1 minute of voiceover in your existence in the marketing. Basically, you're going to make almost as much content as the star of the movie, although you only appear for 30 seconds at minute 65.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So I think there has been some involvement there, but I think people kind of coming to you first and foremost for your marketing or your influencing capability. I think there's a lot more work, faith, trust that needs to go in when you're kind of saying, I want you at the table in the creative shaping. And it's a lot of the creators that I had the good fortune to work with over the years, I think are first and foremost those that are creative powerhouses. And I would look at their work and I was like, this is amazing. How do I, like, more people need to know about you or like work with you? And then spend some time with them. It's like, yeah, they have bigger ambitions and ideas. But sometimes it's like, I don't know actually how to get this thing through, or, if I ever tried to bring it up before, it's not being entertained. Someone just wants me for my influencing capability. And I was like, oh no, yep, get that. But it's like, well, maybe they can keep doing that. And I'll focus on the other side is actually, where there's a real kind of creative powerhouse.
But that's kind of where they miss the beat, because the reason why they influence so much is because to begin with, they were great at creating content that resonated with an audience. So if they hadn't had the imagination, they wouldn't have the audience.
Exactly.
And to miss that part somehow, it's a blatant miss out. It comes from arrogance. You mentioned the bubble. We've all been in the bubble. I guess they were in their bubble and thought YouTube was a smaller bubble and missed something there.
Yeah. I've been involved in like pretty big productions with some of these creators and other producers and production companies. Actually, I'll talk about, so maybe a couple ones. Like, so one, actually, there was a really big production that was getting done, and it was first time. So the writer actually wanted to be a first time director, and then their manager actually wanted to be the producer. And so the creator, who was the creative kind of powerhouse, who was making, frankly, the whole thing get a green light. They were getting met with like, oh, they're an influencer. And so the writer, director, and their manager, now producer, kind of thought like, oh, we're going to have a lot of control over this thing, because they thought they were just working with an influencer. And then the creator's manager had a chat with the other manager and said, just want to make sure we're all very clear here that this whole thing is happening because this creator is the one who's getting the green light, and they are the boss. So you actually are going to be working for them. They are not working for you. And then the result of that was the writer director had a change of heart and pulled back their script, and didn't want to do the project anymore. And I was like, seriously? And yeah, I think like a little bit of like pride and ego there.
Ego, yeah.
And it's just like,
we've seen it in the relationship between Hollywood and gaming 25 years ago, when gaming was growing, but Hollywood was still the big brother. And believe me, around those times, the licensing negotiations were, I would say, voluntarily insulting, voluntarily dismissive. It's like they wanted to dismiss the other side. And I think there's been a lot of that with YouTube too. Thank you so much. And I look forward to see you again for the launch of CreatorPlus, the first movie of CreatorPlus, Jane. And you're going to give me the hookup. I got to watch that as well. So thank you for everything. Thank you for your time. Everybody listening, patreon.com/bigkarma for the community to support us. And may karma be with you, Ben.